Chapter 55. After receiving their rewards in the steward's hall, Tiange and Lu Yidao chatted and laughed as they returned to their residence. Senior martial brother Zhou came back earlier than them. At the moment he was tidying up the spiritual plants he had neglected for several days. When he saw them he smiled and nodded at them. Senior martial brother Zhou's name was Zhou Jinan. This time he was the one who won first place. The two rewards really made people envious. Because they traveled together in Miwu Valley, he treated them differently from before. Tiange and Lu Yidao hastily returned his greeting, then returned to their rooms. Qin Shi and Su Jingji were still waiting for them in the small hall. Jiang Shanghong's room was filled with spiritual aura, so he must have returned to cultivate. This time, it must have been a big blow to him, but they weren't familiar with him, so there was nothing to say. After chatting for a while, the four of them went their separate ways. Tiange hesitated for a moment but still went to knock on the door next door. The door opened, and Qin Shi stood behind it. Junior martial brother Yi, is there something else? Tiange looked at his hand holding the door and raised her eyebrows. Senior martial brother Qin, aren't you going to invite me in? Qin Shi smiled, let go of her hand, and turned around to enter the room. This room was different from the others. She hadn't seen Jiang Shanghong's room, but she had seen Su Jingji and Lu Yidao's. Su Jingji's room was the same as hers. The bedding and praying mats were changed by themselves, and the tea set and so on were all brought from home. As for Lu Yidao, he didn't add many things. Aside from cultivation needs, there was nothing else. The room in front of her was different from theirs. The praying mats weren't things from the school, so she could feel they weren't ordinary. On the table, there was a green jade tea set, sparkling and translucent, containing spiritual aura. Obviously, it wasn't ordinary either. In the middle of the room, there was a cauldron that seemed to be a pill-concocting furnace. The room was surrounded by formation tools. Praying mats, tea set, pill-concocting furnace, and formation. Only these four things were added, but none of them were ordinary. She couldn't see through the other three things, but she could see some clues about the formation. This was a compound formation that combined defense, spiritual aura gathering, restriction on divine sense, and isolation of spiritual aura. Inside this formation, the density of spiritual aura was comparable to that of the North Peak. She inwardly speculated that based on her and second uncle's attainments in formations, they definitely wouldn't be able to create such a formation. This formation must have been created by a cultivator in the core formation realm or above. If it was put on the market, it would fetch at least several thousand spirit stones. She turned around and saw Qin Shi looking at her with a faint smile on his face. Realizing that she had lost her composure, she said, Senior martial brother Qin, we've received our rewards. Let's split them now. As she spoke, she took out a cloth bag from her Qinkuan bag and said, there are 700 spirit stones here. The medallion senior apprentice brother gave me can be exchanged for 200 spirit stones. As for the reward, I urgently need chi gathering pills. Senior apprentice brother's cultivation base is already at the 10th layer, so I don't think you need them that much. So I think the spirit stones are yours, and the chi gathering pills are mine. Qin Shi only glanced at her and said, since I said I'm compensating you, I naturally won't ask you for it. You can use it yourself. Although senior brother doesn't want it, I think it's better for us to be clear about it. After all, I don't want to attract attention. I came out early, but it's not just because of you. Qin Shi muttered to himself for a moment, then took the cloth bag. He took out a handful of spirit stones and threw the rest back to her. Tiange was puzzled. There are about 200 spirit stones in here. Just take it as returning my identity medallion. As for the reward, you'll have to bear part of the risk when you receive it. I don't want it. Besides, do you think I'm lacking spirit stones? Tiange could only smile bitterly at this question. Looking at the things in this room, this senior apprentice brother Qin probably didn't care about these several hundred spirit stones, so she could only say, all right, I'll accept senior apprentice brother's kindness today. Qin Shi nodded then asked, is there anything else, junior apprentice brother? No. Tiange paused for a moment then said helplessly, then I'll take my leave. Qin Shi revealed a faint smile. He was obviously very satisfied with her tactfulness. Junior apprentice brother Yi, please go ahead. He said please, but in fact he just wanted to ask her to leave, right? Mo Tiange felt even more helpless, but she also didn't want to stay, so she followed his wishes and pushed the door open to leave. After returning to her room, she first took a bath, then lay on the bed in a daze. This time, she could be said to have gained quite a lot. 1,000 spirit stones, a bottle of aura-converging pills, and the bottle of aura-converging pills she already had were enough for her to cultivate without worrying about spirit stones for the next 2 years until she reached the 10th layer of the aura-refining realm. However, when she thought about Xianxia, she couldn't help but feel puzzled. In fact, she only said a few words to probe him, so she didn't know he had secrets. However, this person didn't seem to be afraid of her knowing he had ulterior motives and seemed certain she wouldn't divulge them. Why was he so sure? As she thought about it, she suddenly felt her hair stand on end. Could it be that her secret was discovered? Was that why he was so sure? Now that she thought about it carefully, this senior apprentice brother Qin did treat her a little differently from other people, but she couldn't tell what exactly was different. She couldn't figure it out no matter how she thought about it, so she shook her head and decided to sleep first. Tomorrow, she would go down the mountain and ask second uncle. Second uncle had a lot of experience, so he would definitely be able to tell her what to do. She closed her eyes and soon fell asleep. However, she kept dreaming today. First, she dreamed of her childhood. Her mother was still in good health and was cooking in the kitchen. She was only 3 or 4 years old, sitting on a small stool and watching. Then she dreamed of Liu Shan. She didn't understand the human furnace when she was young, but now that she knew what it meant, she became even more terrified. Then she dreamed of Yi Jingwen. She and second uncle were taken back to Xianxia school and were at their disposal. Then she dreamed of Yunwu sect. Her secret was exposed and she was forced to kneel in front of the sect head of True Treasure Hall, waiting to be punished. Mo Tiange woke up with a head full of sweat. She felt weak. It seemed she was really scared yesterday. She patted her forehead and went outside to get some water. After washing herself, she prepared to go down the mountain. She first went to the sect's shop to get the spirit stones she used to sell formations and exchanged them for healing medicinal pills before returning to the small courtyard she used to live in with second uncle. She opened the formation and walked into the courtyard. Before she could knock on the door, she heard second uncle's voice. Xiao Tian. Mo Tiange pushed the door open. Second uncle, it's me. A smile appeared on Yi Zhang's old face, but Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. After not seeing him for a month, second uncle looked even more tired. His face was gray and his hair was white. He looked extremely old. She finally realized that without her knowledge, second uncle had already become like this. With second uncle's cultivation level, even if he had no hope of advancing to the core formation realm, he could have found a small cultivation group and lived the rest of his life in peace. However, in the past 7 or 8 years, second uncle took her everywhere to avoid Xianxia school, racking his brains to earn spirit stones. In the end, he ended up in a situation where he was seriously injured. Second uncle. Tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered, "Did your injuries worsen? Why didn't you tell me?" Yi Jiang looked at her and smiled. Tiange, according to second uncle's estimation, I don't have much time left in my life, so my injuries haven't healed. Although we, cultivators, have a lifespan that surpasses mortals, we still have to die. Don't be sad. This day will come eventually. But, Yi Jiang waved his hand to stop her. I can feel that I only have 2 or 3 years at most. Even if my injuries are healed, it won't be enough. Now that you're in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm, second uncle hopes to see you advance to the foundation building realm before I pass away. At that time, even if I die, I'll be able to rest in peace. Tears involuntarily fell from her eyes. Upon hearing what he said, she hastily wiped them away, took out her Qinkuan bag, poured out spirit stones and medicinal pills, and said with a smile, "Second uncle, look, I won a lot of people in Miwu Valley. These rewards are enough for me to cultivate until the 10th layer of the aura refining realm." Yi Jiang smiled. Second uncle always believed you could do it. Don't worry, second uncle will definitely hold on until that time. Therefore, you have to cultivate diligently, understand? Tiange nodded, but she felt bitter in her heart. She knew this day would come eventually. Ever since second uncle was injured, he kept reminding her that he didn't have much time left in his life. Cultivators naturally had to be indifferent to life and death, but although she understood this, she couldn't help but feel sad. 10 years ago, it was her mother who abandoned her. Now it was second uncle. The most important people by her side always left her. Alright, tell me about your trip to Miwu Valley. Second uncle can give you some pointers. Tiange calmed down and told him everything about Miwu Valley in detail. Finally, she talked about Qin Shi. Yi Jiang was silent for a long time before he said, "That person's background must be extraordinary. According to what you said, he's so experienced in fights of magical powers and doesn't lack treasures. He really doesn't seem like an aura-refining cultivator. Unless he's not an individual cultivator and has a high-level cultivator as an elder, or he had other fortuitous encounters, you don't have to worry. He obviously doesn't have any ulterior motives toward you from what he did. You just need to reduce your contact with him in the future." Tiange felt a bit relieved. "I understand. I won't care about what he does. We'll just continue our relationship like before." "Correct. You should go back and continue cultivating. Second uncle doesn't have much time, so you have to hurry." Tiange was silent. In the end, she listened to him and said, "I understand, second uncle." Chapter 56. After returning to Mount Yunwu, Tiange officially entered closed-door meditation. Aside from going back to see second uncle every half a month, she no longer went out for a stroll. Occasionally, when she came out of closed-door meditation, she would find summoning talismans for Murong Yen, Wang Qianyi, and even Shen Bing. Originally, she didn't have any friendship with them, but after the trip to Miwu Valley, they became closer. When they learned that she was cultivating in closed-door meditation, they all came to greet her. Shen Bing and Wang Qianyi even said that if she needed any help, she could just ask. Tiange knew it wasn't appropriate for her to have too much contact with them, so she only responded politely and didn't ask for anything. Every time she came out and ran into the other senior martial brothers living with her, she was laughed at. Su Jingji was even more envious and jealous. He said that although she looked good, her skinny appearance didn't look like a man at all. She obviously wasn't as tall, handsome, and elegant as him, so why were the famous beautiful senior martial sisters in the sect so good to her? Tiange smiled bitterly in her heart, feeling even more distressed. Men and women were different. She increasingly felt that pretending to be a man was getting more and more tiring. If her cultivation level was high, she could directly use the illusory technique and pretend to be whatever she wanted. However, she was just a small aura-refining cultivator. If she wanted to use the illusory technique to deceive high-level cultivators, wasn't that just courting death? 2 years passed in a flash. Although she grew a little taller, it was very little. She wasn't considered tall among women, let alone among men. Lu Yidao was a head taller than her, Qin Shi was a head taller, and even Su Jingji, who wasn't considered tall, was half a head taller than her. Perhaps it was because she was too unlucky. The men in the room were all tall, making her look even thinner. Coupled with her thin shoulders and thin body, even though she had been dressing as a woman for many years and no longer looked like a woman, she was still very eye-catching. Su Jingji laughed at her more than once, saying that she looked like a man but looked like a woman. Although it didn't arouse anyone's suspicion, it gave Tiange a wake-up call and constantly reminded her to be careful. 2 years later, when she ran out of spirit stones, she finally reached the 10th layer of the aura-refining realm. At this time, Yunwu sect's minor competition was about to begin. Therefore, she left closed-door meditation after her realm stabilized. As soon as she came out, the other 3 were already waiting in the small hall. In the past 3 years, Lu Yidao and Qin Shi's cultivation levels had become even more exquisite. Although Su Jingji was a bit inferior, he also rushed into the 9th layer of the aura-refining realm and wasn't far from the 10th layer. In order to celebrate her coming out of seclusion, the group decided to go sightseeing and have a picnic. More than once, Murong Yen expressed that she missed her roasted beast meat, so she also sent a summoning talisman to invite her. Since she was invited, she naturally invited Wang Lin and Shenbing as well. At the same time, she also notified senior martial brother Zhou. Originally, Mo Tiange thought that although Murong Yen would definitely come, Shenbing and Wang Lin might not necessarily come, let alone senior martial brother Zhou. Who would have thought that not a single one would be missing? The group of people chatted and barbecued by the waterfall pool on the southern peak. Mo Tiange sat by the water's edge, struggling to skewer a row of beast meat. She used the fire spiritual art with her left hand and spread flames on the beast meat. Not far away, under a tree, there was a piece of linen cloth with tea and snacks on it. On the side, Lu Yidao and senior martial brother Zhou were exchanging cultivation insights. Su Jingji was sitting next to Shenbing and Wang Qian to join in on the fun. She was lazily leaning against a tree, basking in the sun. Murong Yen was sitting next to her, staring at the skewers while drooling. From time to time, she would ask if they were done. This group of people said they were celebrating her reaching the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, but in the end, they said that her barbecuing skills were pretty good, so they just let her do the barbecuing for everyone. Alas! When she finally finished barbecuing a batch, she wiped her sweat, then placed it on a tray and handed it to Murong Yen. "It's done. Call them over to eat." There was no need for anyone to call them. Once they saw that Mo Tiange had finished barbecuing, those people who were originally very leisurely swarmed over like a swarm of bees. Each of them took a handful and gorged themselves. After Su Jingji finished gnawing on the meat in his hand, he shouted, "It's really delicious. Junior martial brother Yi, give me a few more pieces." Mo Tiange, who had just washed her hands by the waterfall, rolled her eyes when she heard what he said. "If you light the fire, I'll barbecue it for you." Su Jingji scratched his head. "Light the fire? But I don't have fire spiritual roots, so I can't use fire spells." The group of people laughed. Senior martial brother Zhou said, "Junior martial brother Ye's cooking skills are really good. It's much better than the ones in our dining hall." Murong Yen nodded repeatedly. "Yeah, I haven't eaten it for 2 years. I've been craving it to death." Lu Yidao rubbed his belly. "This little bit isn't enough. Junior martial brother Yi, barbecue more." Mo Tiange sighed. "Someone come and light the fire for me, okay? My fire spells are really not that good. I'm really tired after doing it for half a day." Murong Yen hastily said, "I also don't have fire spiritual roots. How about I use talismans? I have several fire talismans here. We can't waste them like this." Su Jingji immediately interjected, "Senior martial brother Qin is the best at fire spells. Senior martial brother Qin, come and help me." Ever since this brat met his 3 senior martial sisters, he was extremely attentive. Needless to say, he always called Shenbing and Wang Lin senior martial sister. His mouth seemed to be smeared with honey. Mo Tiange shook her head and smiled. She saw Qianxi's helpless expression, but she didn't refuse. She stood up and dusted off her sleeves, then walked over. "That'll do. I won't eat for free. Junior martial brother Yi, please tell me what you want." Mo Tiange naturally wouldn't be polite. Qianxi majored in fire spells, so he wasn't half as good as her. She took out a thin blade, cut the beast meat piece by piece and strung it with a tree branch. She then said to Qianxi, "Senior martial brother Qin, don't burn it too fiercely. If you burn the tree branch, it'll be a waste." Qianxi nodded and placed his right palm on the meat. Flames suddenly appeared and soon, the aroma of meat drifted out. Mo Tiange saw that the situation wasn't good, so she hastily said, "Senior martial brother Qin, slow down." She hadn't seasoned the meat yet and hadn't turned the meat over yet. She didn't want it to be burnt. Alas, it's not good to have a powerful fire spell. It's not convenient to control the heat. However, with Qianxi's help, the roasting was a lot faster. Before long, the roasted meat was piled up to the brim, and the two of them finally stopped. "Okay, this should be enough for you, right?" Mo Tiange tidied up the food and pushed the tray to Murong Yen. This plate of meat was half a spiritual deer. Murong Yen cheered, "Junior martial brother Yi, you're the best." By the time she finished washing her face and went back, there was only half a plate of meat left on the plate. She leaned against a tree and said with a smile, "Junior Marshall Brother Yi, you should drink some tea and eat some snacks. This plate? I think it's enough for them." Tiange rolled her eyes. They roasted the meat for a long time, but she still couldn't eat it. Lu Yidao laughed and patted her shoulder. "Junior Marshall Brother Yi, who told you to be so good at cooking? Capable people do more work. Good. I really owe you guys." In any case, she could already abstain from eating, so she didn't like to eat as much as before. After eating the roasted meat, they chatted while drinking tea. The topic of their conversation couldn't deviate from the group's minor competition that was going to happen soon. Generally, there were minor competitions and major competitions in cultivation groups. The major competition was usually held once every several decades or even once every century. Cultivators in the aura refining, foundation building, and core formation realms would participate. However, only aura refining disciples participated in the minor competition, and it was held once every 10 years or less. Although the rewards of the major competition were generous, it was too far away from them. Aura refining disciples usually paid more attention to the minor competition because it was related to the distribution of foundation building pills. Among them, Su Jingji and Murong Yan were in the 9th layer of the aura refining realm, Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was in the 11th layer, and the others were in the 10th layer. Aside from Senior Marshal Brother Zhou, everyone else had to participate in the minor competition. Only by participating in the minor competition could they obtain foundation building pills. Only with foundation building pills could they build their foundation. However, they were only a medium-sized cultivation group. Every 10 years, 20 to 30 foundation building pills would be distributed, and only about 10% of them would succeed. Among them, aside from Senior Marshal Brother Zhou, who would definitely advance to the foundation building realm, it was hard to say what would happen to the others. Among several hundred people, it was already difficult to fight for a spot, let alone obtaining a foundation building pill. In fact, taking foundation building pills wasn't the only way to build one's foundation. It was just that ordinary people didn't even need to think about the other methods. Taking ancient spiritual panaceas, pouring spiritual aura into one's body through a secret technique by a high-level nascent soul cultivator, or obtaining other fated chances that suddenly poured a large amount of spiritual aura into one's body could allow one to make a breakthrough in their realm. How could these methods be thought of by ordinary cultivators like them? Only foundation establishment pills could have any hope of doing so. The more they talked about this topic, the heavier it became. In the end, everyone lost interest in talking, so they simply ended the gathering and went back to their respective places. Tiange's heart was heavy. Although she had advanced to the 10th layer and had a 50% chance of obtaining a spot, she didn't even have a 10% chance of successfully building her foundation. She didn't forget that she had 5 spiritual roots. family's ancestor, Yaoqing, once said that she didn't have ordinary 5 spiritual roots and that she had the spiritual roots of the origin, an average of 5 spiritual roots. She inherited it from another ancestor. If she had a specific cultivation technique, the cultivation speed of someone with the spiritual roots of the origin wouldn't be slow. However, after entering the cultivation world for so long, she and second uncle had searched through all the books and records, yet they still didn't know anything about the spiritual roots of the origin. 2 years ago, second uncle said he only had 2 to 3 years left in his lifespan. Now, 2 years had passed, and she had smoothly advanced to the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. However, she discovered that the path to immortality was vague, and the path to building her foundation was still far from her. Chapter 57. Not long after, the Stewards' Hall announced the date of the minor competition, and Senior Marshal Brother Zhou brought specific information. The minor competition of aura refining cultivators in the 7th layer and above could register. In this minor competition, the top 30 would receive a foundation building pill as a reward, as well as spirit stones and so on. Everyone looked happy when they heard the news. The top 30 would receive a reward. It seemed the sect's pill concocting this time went very smoothly. Although the foundation building pill wasn't an ancient miraculous medicine, its materials weren't common. Usually, the sect would spend several years to concoct one furnace of pills, and the success rate of this furnace would affect the rewards of the minor competition. When luck was bad, there would only be about 10 finished pills from one furnace. After deducting the quota for 11th and 12th layer aura refining disciples, as well as some reserved for disciples with great contributions, the rest would be the rewards of the minor competition. In this way, only the top 10 would receive a reward. But this time, the top 30 would receive a reward. Their luck was really good. The minor competition was also a ring competition, but after drawing lots, they would fight each other in pairs. The winner would advance until the first place was decided. Therefore, this kind of competition made many people feel lucky. If the opponent they drew wasn't strong, it would be easy for them to get a high ranking. However, entering the top 50 basically couldn't rely on luck. There were about 400 cultivators in the 7th layer and above, and after 3 rounds of competition, only those who entered the top 50 would enter the top 50. Aura refining disciples in the 7th layer and above began to prepare one after another. For a while, the prices of talismans, medicinal pills, and spirit tools increased by 2 times compared to usual. Immortal rejoiced that she was prepared long ago. Otherwise, she wouldn't have any money to buy things. The spirit stones she had were almost used up during her 2 years of closed-door meditation. This time, second uncle prepared a lot of talismans and medicinal pills for her. When she found out, she discovered that second uncle sold some of his belongings. Because of this, Immortal secretly made up her mind. Even if it was for second uncle, she had to obtain the foundation building pill. Soon after, senior martial brother Zhou brought another piece of news. Xianxia sect invited the 3 groups to hold a minor competition together to motivate their disciples. This wasn't the first time in the history of the 3 groups. In the past, the 3 groups indeed held a minor competition together, but this was the first time they held one together with such a huge difference in strength. For this reason, Jindao School's school head Jin wasn't happy about it. In the end, Xianxia sect's school head Li proposed that Xianxia sect take out some foundation-building pills as the reward for the overall ranking. As for the rewards for the internal ranking of the 3 groups, the 3 groups would distribute them among themselves. This made Jin Zhangmen feel a little more comfortable. Even if no disciple of Jindao School received the reward, they wouldn't lose anything. It was just that they would lose face. However, if they refused, they would become a laughingstock, and people would gossip that the Jindao School was weak and timid. Therefore, they could only bite the bullet and agree, hoping that 1 or 2 disciples could live up to expectations. She couldn't understand Xianxia sect's purpose. Although Xianxia sect expressed that they would only take out 10 foundation-building pills, these 10 foundation-building pills could possibly add 1 or 2 foundation-building cultivators to their sect. Was it really necessary to make such a contribution just to save face? While the 4 of them were chatting in the small living room, Jiang Shanghong, who rarely came out, snorted coldly when he heard what Immortal said. It'll look good on your face, so it'll be much easier for you to recruit disciples with good aptitudes in the future. In the long run, the benefits will be much greater than having 1 or 2 foundation-building cultivators. Everyone was silent. Although no one liked Jiang Shanghong, he was still a disciple of Jiang clan, so the way he looked at things was very different from them. What he said was also very reasonable. If they became famous, in the future, all the children with spiritual roots in this area would go to Xianxia sect first, and they would be able to pick those with good aptitudes first. If a few of them had single or mutated spiritual roots, in the future, the gap between them and the other 2 groups would only grow bigger and bigger. This wasn't something that 1 or 2 foundation-building cultivators could pull back. After he finished speaking, Jiang Shanghong once again returned to his room. In the past few years, he still ignored everyone and only focused on cultivating. Now, he only lacked foundation-building pills, so it seemed he was determined to win this minor competition. Su Jingji stared at the door of Jiang Shanghong's room and asked the 3 people in amazement, "Did you guys see that? Senior martial brother Jiang actually talked to us. Is that true?" His tone made Immortal laugh. "It's not like senior martial brother Jiang doesn't talk to us. It was just that his tone wasn't very good and he didn't talk to us too often. Xianxia, who was drawing talismans on the table, raised his head. Junior martial brother Su, are you ready? This question touched Su Jingji's sore spot. With a bitter expression, he said, No, my big brother also wants to participate in the minor competition. My clan supports him, so I can only make do with some talismans. In any case, it's better than us. Lu Yidao stopped cultivating and said, You still have your clan's support. We, on the other hand, are genuine individual cultivators with no one to rely on. Aside from the sect's supplies, we don't have anything else. Su Jingji jumped up and shouted, Senior martial brother Lu, you're still talking. Last time, in Miwu Valley's competition, how many rewards did you get? Lu Yidao scratched his head. It's been 2 years, yet junior martial brother Su still remembers. Su Jingji snorted. Of course I didn't get anything. Otherwise, I would have advanced to the 10th layer like junior martial brother Yi. I really don't want to call junior martial brother Yi martial uncle in the future. How could it be that easy? Mo Tiange sighed. Senior martial brother Su, it's not like you don't know that I have 5 spiritual roots. Being able to cultivate to the 10th layer of the aura refining realm is already my good fortune. As for advancing to the foundation building realm, how many cultivators with 5 spiritual roots can successfully advance to the foundation building realm? At this point, Su Jingji also shook his head and smiled bitterly. Although I have 4 spiritual roots, my cultivation has always been mediocre, so I could only enter the sect through the Immortal's assembly. Junior martial brother Yi, being able to cultivate to this stage with 5 spiritual roots? You're indeed better than me. The two of them looked at each other and sighed, making the atmosphere very depressing. Xianxia, who was still concentrating on drawing talismans, said, Although aptitude is important, it's not the only thing. Some nascent soul cultivators aren't geniuses with single or mutated spiritual roots. More than half of them have double or even 3 spiritual roots. Mo Tiange had never heard of this before. Why is that? Xianxia flicked his finger, burning the broken talisman. He then glanced at her and said, Cultivators with single or mutated spiritual roots can advance through the realms very quickly and easily advance to the core formation realm. However, it's precisely because of this that their temperaments aren't firm enough, so they haven't been tested by their inner demons. Once they reach the nascent soul realm, aptitude doesn't play much of a role, but temperaments do. They can easily cultivate to the peak stage of the core formation realm, but they often fail at the inner demons during the nascent soul realm. On the other hand, it's not easy for cultivators with double or 3 spiritual roots to cultivate to the core formation realm. They usually have to go through trials, but their willpower is firm. When they reach the nascent soul realm, their lifespans are usually more than half, and their temperaments and experiences can withstand the trials. Therefore, although it's not easy for them to cultivate, it's much safer for them to form their nascent soul. The other 3 people had never heard of this before, so they were all amazed. So doesn't that mean cultivators with double or 3 spiritual roots are better? Why doesn't the sect attach importance to them? Xianxia raised the corners of his mouth, looking like he was smiling. Now, he also smiled occasionally, so he looked a bit more human compared to when he first arrived. That being said, how many people have single or mutated spiritual roots? Although double spiritual roots are a bit rare, triple spiritual roots are everywhere. A cultivation group has 5,000 aura refining disciples, but there might only be 2 or 3 with single or mutated spiritual roots, 4 to 500 with double spiritual roots, and more than 4,000 with triple spiritual roots. As long as there are no accidents, these 2 or 3 people with single or mutated spiritual roots will advance to the core formation realm. However, among these 4,000 people with double or mutated spiritual roots, only about 10 people will advance to the core formation realm. If they form their nascent soul, the former is half, while the latter might not even have one. Speaking up to this point, even he sighed. The path to the nascent soul realm is indeed much more difficult than we imagined. Those with good aptitudes can smoothly advance to the core formation realm even if they don't have enough comprehension and effort. Those with poor aptitudes, Not to mention the nascent soul realm, even reaching the core formation realm requires several times the effort. Once he finished speaking, the other three people sank into silence. After a long time, Lu Yidao finally said, "Not to mention the core formation realm and the nascent soul realm, even building our foundation is a problem for us." Yes, Su Jingji said, among more than 400 aura refining disciples, perhaps only 2 or 3 will advance to the foundation building realm. I wonder if any of us will be able to move to the North Peak next year. Chapter 58. The Greenwood Sword, the talisman's second uncle prepared, seeds, spirit stones, healing medicinal pills, and several simple formations. When she finished checking everything, Su Jingji knocked on the door. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, are you done?" Mo Tiange answered, "I'm coming." In the courtyard outside the house, all the cultivators gathered together. Except for Senior Martial Brother Zhou, everyone looked more or less nervous. They all entered the sect through the Immortal's assembly. Their cultivation levels weren't weak, but they couldn't obtain foundation-building pills. It could be said that they all entered the sect for the sake of foundation-building pills. Mo Tiange was no exception. As individual cultivators, their biggest difficulty wasn't lacking spirit veins and medicinal pills, but not being able to obtain foundation-building pills. If spirit veins weren't good, they could make do. If they lacked medicinal pills, they could slowly earn money to buy them. With enough opportunities and diligence, reaching the 10th layer of the aura refining realm wouldn't be too difficult. However, individual cultivators had no way to obtain foundation-building pills. Cultivation groups and clans that had the ability to concoct foundation-building pills basically wouldn't sell them. Only under some special circumstances would they sell them. Even so, their prices were still sky-high. Every time they were sold for several thousand spirit stones, they simply couldn't be afforded by ordinary cultivators. Therefore, only by entering a sect would they have the opportunity to obtain foundation-building pills and possibly build their foundation. Senior Martial Brother Zhou glanced at them and said, "I don't need to tell you how important today is. I think you all know it. Your future depends on your hard work today. Let's go." The venue of the minor competition was finally set at Xianxia sect. No one was surprised by this result. Since Xianxia sect deliberately wanted to show off, the result was bound to be like this. Yunwu sect, Xianxia sect, and Jindao school were the three great cultivation groups in the eastern region of Kunwu. The three groups depended on each other and also restrained each other, maintaining a subtle relationship. In the past, there had been cases where one group was particularly powerful. Usually, at that time, that group would become the leader of the three groups. Judging from the current situation, Xianxia sect was obviously pursuing this position. However, this had nothing to do with young aura refining disciples like them. No matter what happened to the higher-ups, they just needed to cultivate well and wouldn't be implicated. On the day of the minor competition, sect leader Fang appeared in front of everyone again. This time, he was even more cautious than during the competition in Miwu Valley. There were 5 core formation cultivators. In the entire Yunwu sect, there were only 7 or 8 core formation cultivators in total. Most of them, excluding those who were in closed-door meditation, were all here. Mo Tiange frowned inwardly. Apparently, this minor competition was just a name. Most likely, it was a competition between the 3 groups in private. It should be known that core formation cultivators normally wouldn't appear in front of ordinary disciples. They would only be able to see the sect head during events like joining the sect or the Miwu Valley competition. However, this was only a minor competition. It would be fine if it was just like the Miwu Valley competition, but there were actually 5 core formation cultivators accompanying them. It was clear that this wasn't a simple competition. It would take about 6 hours to travel from Yunwu sect to Xianxia sect on a core formation grandmaster's flying magic weapon, which was a bit further than Miwu Valley. By the time they arrived at Xianxia sect, all the Yunwu sect disciples felt like their horizons had been broadened. Xianxia sect was situated on top of a high mountain. This mountain was thousands of feet high and towered into the clouds. Neat and tidy jade steps stretched from the foot of the mountain all the way to the magnificent mountain gate. After that, there was a vast square and a lofty main hall. Looking down from the sky, Missouri Tiange had to admit that compared to Xianxia sect's grandeur, Yunwu sect seemed a bit small. Xianxia sect's square was more than twice the size of Yunwu sect's. All the aura-refining disciples participating in the minor competition were in the square, but it didn't feel crowded at all. Several fighting rings were neatly placed in the middle of the square. The disciples of the three groups each occupied a corner. Jindao School had the least number of disciples compared to last time. The number of Yunwu sect's disciples increased slightly, but Xianxia sect's disciples were obviously the most numerous. The right side of the fighting ring was densely packed. After that, the disciples of the three groups drew lots. The total number of people was more than 1,000, so the time taken to draw lots was very long. Tiange inadvertently raised her head and saw that the sect heads of the three groups weren't present. None of the core formation cultivators were present either. She confirmed her guess. It seemed today was indeed a competition between the three groups, and Xianxia sect wanted to suppress the other two groups. The preliminary round of the minor competition began under the arrangement of the foundation building cultivators. The number Tiange drew was number 347, which was in the middle. It was neither good nor bad. This time they came together. After drawing lots, they went to their respective fighting rings. Tiange's first opponent was number 348, an 8th layer aura refining disciple of Xianxia sect. Her opponent's cultivation level wasn't high, and his magical power was also ordinary. Under her greenwood sword's attack, he admitted defeat in less than a quarter of an hour. She jumped off the fighting ring, feeling somewhat absent-minded. She didn't know why, but she felt restless ever since she arrived at Xianxia sect. The first round of the competition ended one after another. Just as the foundation building cultivators were about to discuss how to proceed with the second round of the competition, a hall of Xianxia sect not far from them suddenly collapsed with a loud rumble, emitting blazing flames. The aura-refining disciples in the square were in an uproar, and the foundation-building cultivators' expressions changed greatly. From the ruins of that hall, several silhouettes rushed out. Each of them had a defensive magic barrier over their heads as they fought. They were obviously high-level cultivators. The spiritual aura pressure produced by their fights of magical power was extremely great, making it difficult for the aura-refining disciples to bear. Upon seeing this scene, a foundation-building cultivator from Yunwu sect suddenly raised his voice and shouted, "Yunwu sect's disciples, come here." The cultivators from Jindao School came to their senses and also shouted, "Jindao School's disciples, come here." The aura-refining disciples didn't understand what was going on, so they obeyed out of habit. In an instant, the square was thrown into chaos. The cultivators who were mixed together ran here and there, trampling on others from time to time. Amidst the chaos, Tiange saw several familiar figures among the cultivators fighting with magical powers. Yunwu sect's sect head Fang Dingyue, Xianxia sect's sect head Li, and Jindao School's sect head Jin were nowhere to be seen. Apparently, the three groups had a falling out. It was no wonder she felt restless just now. Those who studied formations were more sensitive to yin, yang, and the 5 elements, so they could occasionally sense bad luck. This was really bad. This was Xianxia sect, and she was only an aura-refining disciple with meager strength. If Yunwu sect and Jindao School really had a falling out with Xianxia sect, aura-refining disciples like her would be in danger. Tiange's face turned pale when she thought about this. "Li Mingzhang, you old fool. You actually plotted against me." Flying in the air, sect head Fang pointed at sect head Li and cursed loudly. Sect head Li smiled lightly. "Fang Dingyue, now that things have come to this, you'd better admit defeat." As he spoke, he cast a glance at the square. "If you admit defeat, I'll leave some incense for your Yunwu sect today. Otherwise, these future pillars of Yunwu sect will all be gone." Although his tone was flat, the threat was obvious. Sect head Fang immediately bristled with anger and sneered repeatedly. "Don't be complacent. If I explode my gold core, your Xianxia sect won't be able to keep its incense." When a gold core cultivator detonated his gold core, even a nascent soul cultivator would be injured. If sect head Fong was ruthless enough to destroy indiscriminately, perhaps not a single disciple from the three groups would survive in the square. Mo Tienga's palms suddenly broke out in cold sweat. She couldn't be that unlucky, could she? If she died in the internal strife between the three groups before even building her foundation, she'd really die with everlasting regret. Sect head Li's expression remained unchanged. He smiled contemptuously and said, "Do you think we didn't guard against you when we dared to attack you? You might as well use your spiritual aura." Sect head Fong's complexion suddenly turned blue. "You dare to exterminate my Yunwu sect? Aren't you afraid that Elder Yen will come back and become hostile?" Elder Yen was the Grand Supreme Elder of Yunwu sect, the only nascent Soul Grandmaster in Yunwu sect. Sect head Li snorted. "Do you think we don't know? Your Elder Yen passed away 10 years ago. He just didn't dare to make it public." Once he said that, not only did sect head Fong's complexion turn pale, but all the Yunwu sect disciples in the square were also shocked. This matter was obviously Yunwu sect's top secret. Not to mention ordinary disciples like them, even foundation-building disciples didn't know about it. It seemed Xianxia sect's move had been planned for a long time. Mo Tienga hid in the crowd, trying hard to think about the current situation. Since she was in Xianxia sect, it was impossible for her to escape by herself. She could only wait and see how these people would deal with the Yunwu sect disciples. They couldn't possibly kill all of them, right? The more she thought about it, the more cold sweat covered her forehead. Second uncle was still waiting for her to bring back foundation-building pills. Who would have thought this was actually a trap? Chapter 59. The people in the square didn't know what happened in the main hall, but they all saw the result. When they heard Xianxia sect's sect head Li's order, sect head Fong was immediately beaten down. No one knew what they did to him, but he couldn't resist at all. The other core formation cultivators were nowhere to be seen. It was unclear whether they fell into a trap or were persuaded. Core formation cultivators cherished their lives very much. Even if their sect was destroyed, they might not necessarily be willing to risk their lives. Sect head Fong was, after all, the sect head of a sect. He also knew that with his status, it wouldn't be good for Yunwu sect to be destroyed, so he risked his life to resist. Now that sect head Fong was defeated and obviously wouldn't be spared, the Yunwu sect disciples in the square were all frightened and scared. Fong Dingyue, die in peace. Today, our Xianxia sect will merge with the other three groups and from now on, will be the 8th Great Cultivation Group. Ha! Amidst the laughter, sect head Fong fell to the ground with a loud bang. A sorrowful and indignant shout came from the Yunwu sect disciples. Sect head Li turned his head. Ruthlessness flashed in his eyes as he waved his sleeve. Instantly, that person screamed and fell to the ground. Mo Tienga turned her head and saw the foundation-building cultivator lying on the ground. His eyes were wide open, as if he died with a grievance. There was a bloody hole in his body, and blood was gurgling out. At this time, she heard a mournful shout, "Father!" It was Wang Qianyi. The dead foundation-building cultivator was her father, Wang Qiao. Although Wang Qianyi had a foundation-building cultivator as her father, she never showed off. Usually, she only said she was Wang Qiao's disciple. This was the first time she called him that in front of outsiders. Mo Tienga looked worriedly at sect head Li, who was still in the air. Fortunately, sect head Li didn't want to kill him since he saw he was just an aura-refining cultivator. Under this ruthlessness, none of the Yunwu sect disciples dared to move. Several foundation-building cultivators were trembling with fear. They didn't expect Li Mingzhang to be so cruel and merciless. Wang Qiao was killed right after he shouted. Sect head Li seemed very satisfied when he saw the silence below. He even smiled. Disciples, as you can see, Yunwu sect is removed from East Kunwo from now on. If you join Xianxia sect, you'll receive the same treatment as before, maybe even better. Otherwise, he glanced at the square and his gaze stopped on Wang Qiao's corpse. His meaning couldn't be more obvious. Under such a combination of carrots, Yunwu sect's aura-refining disciples and several foundation-building disciples didn't dare to move in the slightest. All of them acquiesced to this result. Sect leader Li grunted with satisfaction and turned to the disciples of Jindao school. You don't have to take any chances. Now that Jindao school leader can't move, you're at our mercy. Your Jindao school is the same as Yunwu sect. From today onwards, you'll belong to my Xianxia sect. If there's anyone who doesn't accept with Yunwu sect as an example, no one in Jindao school dared to make a move. Right now, Xianxia sect was really too powerful. Even if the two groups joined forces, it still wouldn't be enough to fight against them, let alone now that all the golden core cultivators were trapped by them. At this moment, several people flew out from the ruins of the main hall. Some were carrying, some were dead, and some were alive. They were the core formation cultivators from Yunwu sect and Jindao school. Most of them were already dead. A few of them were still alive, but they were still unconscious. She didn't know what method Xianxia sect used to catch so many core formation cultivators in one fell swoop. Sect leader Li turned around and said to someone, "Brother Jiang, this time, it's all thanks to you. In the future, Xianxia sect's Mount Yunwu branch will depend on you." The person he called Brother Jiang was a man who seemed to be in his 30s. He wore a yellow robe, and on his cuffs, there were several clouds embroidered. This was the symbol of Yunwu sect. The man looked very indifferent as he said, "How can I disobey the sect leader's order?" From his words, he already regarded sect leader Li as the head of the three groups. Sect leader Li seemed to be very satisfied with his answer and laughed. Obviously, this cultivator surnamed Jiang was Yunwu sect's spy. Tiange didn't know what benefits Xianxia sect promised him to make him betray his own sect. Most core formation cultivators were proud and arrogant. If they didn't promise great benefits, they wouldn't bear such infamy. At this moment, there was a commotion in Jindao school's camp. A core formation cultivator carried a person over and threw him in front of sect leader Li. Tiange focused her gaze and saw that it was actually Jindao school's school leader Jin. At this moment, sect leader Li was very complacent. He stared at the ashen-faced school leader Jin and said with a smile, "Brother Jin, considering our many years of friendship, I'll give you another chance. How about Jindao school submit to my Xianxia sect?" School leader Jin looked very angry. His whole body was in a sorry state. He turned to look at Jindao school's camp, then his gaze fell on the corpse on the side. After a long time, he finally sighed dejectedly. "Do I have any other choice now? You're the knife and I'm the meat. I can only let Brother Li make the decision." His words clearly showed that he had accepted his fate. Although everyone knew this, it was different when the sect leader personally said it. The disciples of Jindao school immediately gave up. The overall situation was set. Jindao school no longer existed. Sect leader Li revealed a satisfied smile. He raised his head and gazed into the distance. "That'll do. Marshal Uncle Qian has given his order. Since these people have been subdued, it's time to deal with the remaining problems." Remaining problems? For a moment, Tiange was puzzled. However, she saw sect leader Li give an order, leaving a core formation cultivator here. He then led everyone away, taking school leader Jin with him. It was only when their flight lights disappeared into the horizon that the aura refining disciples in the square heaved sighs of relief. The spiritual aura pressure from so many core formation cultivators was really hard for them to bear. As soon as they left, the disciples of Xianxia sect were already talking and laughing happily. They naturally didn't know about such an important matter beforehand. However, they were naturally happy to see their sect annexing the other two cultivation groups and becoming the biggest cultivation group in this area. In contrast, the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school were all dispirited and anxious. Although sect leader Li wanted them to submit and not kill them, they were the ones who were annexed after all. Who knew what would happen in the future? Besides, most of them were disciples of cultivation clans attached to Yunwu sect. They didn't know whether their clans would suffer a calamity because of this. If they did, their clans would be exterminated. The only remaining core formation cultivator was currently sitting cross-legged in the center of the square. Perhaps because the noise was too loud, he opened his eyes and shouted, "My sect's disciples can leave, but the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school are not allowed to leave even half a step. Once he said that, the square immediately became quiet. The disciples of Xianxia sect lowered their heads and left one after another. The disciples of the other two cultivation groups didn't dare to make any noise. Seeing that all the disciples of Xianxia sect had left in just a moment, the core formation cultivator once again closed his eyes and meditated. After a long time, seeing that the core formation cultivator wasn't paying any attention to them, the disciples of the two cultivation groups went to look for their relatives and friends to discuss the matter in low voices. Upon seeing this, Tiange also quietly went to Wang Qian's place. Since Wang Qiao's death, Wang Qianyi had been holding her father's corpse, sitting on the ground in a daze while shedding tears. It seemed like she couldn't accept what had happened. Shen Bing and Murong Yan were already by her side. The two of them tried to persuade her in low voices, but their hearts were also burning with anxiety. The two of them were also disciples of cultivation clans, and they even had masters. Faced with this kind of unforeseen event, they were afraid their clans and masters would be implicated. Tiange first saluted Shen Bing and Murong Yan when she arrived by their side. She then advised Wang Qianyi in a low voice, "Senior Martial Sister Wang, now isn't the time to be sad. Martial Uncle Wang has passed away, so the rest of the matters will have to depend on you. You have to keep your spirits up." Wang Qianyi's gaze wavered. Tiange hastily said, "We still have to rely on Senior Martial Sister Wang to take care of your mother and the people of Wang clan, lest they get involved in this matter." Wang Qianyi took a deep breath, wiped her tears and looked at Tiange. "Thank you for the reminder, Junior Martial Brother Yi. I'll persevere." Tiange nodded lightly, then no longer said anything to them. Although she was familiar with Wang Qianyi, their friendship hadn't reached the point where they could advance or retreat together. Before the matter was clear, it was better for them not to have too many interactions. Tiange raised her head, wanting to look for Lu Yidao and the others, but she saw Jiang Shanghong first. Jiang Shanghong's expression was unsightly and looked increasingly gloomy for some unknown reason. Chapter 60. Before long, they found Su Jingji. When Tiange approached him, she discovered that his expression was also very unsightly. She pulled his sleeve to draw his attention back to her. "Junior Martial Brother Yi." Su Jingji trembled slightly. How could this be? How could Tiange answer this question? She could only comfort him. "Senior Martial Brother Su, don't worry. I think they just want to annex the other two groups. As long as it's not necessary, they won't kill anyone." Su Jingji shook his head. How could it be that easy to annex other cultivation groups? The three cultivation groups have been established here for several thousand years. It's not like there hasn't been a situation where one of them was especially powerful, but they've always lived in harmony. Every cultivation group has a complicated relationship. It's easy to oppress them with force, but it's not easy to completely control them. I have a feeling that if Xianxia sect makes a move, blood will flow like a river. Tiange was speechless. She didn't really understand the matters of cultivation groups and clans, so what Su Jingji said sounded very reasonable. He turned around and saw that Xianxia had come looking for him. "Junior Martial Brothers." Although his expression was calm, it was much graver than usual. "Senior Martial Brother Qian." Tiange turned to look at him. "Have you seen Senior Martial Brother Lu?" Qianxia shook his head. "I don't know where Senior Martial Brother Lu is. I only saw you two." He paused for a moment, then said, "But I saw Senior Martial Brother Jiang, and his complexion looked very bad." Su Jingji snorted coldly. Of course his expression wasn't good. It was their Jiang clan who betrayed Yunwu sect. Both Tiange and Qianxia were stunned. Jiang clan? The core formation cultivator who acted as a spy just now was indeed called Brother Jiang. So that's Jiang clan's core formation grandmaster. Qianxia nodded slightly. It seems Senior Martial Brother Jiang also feels bad. What's there to be unhappy about? Su Jingji sneered. This time, their Jiang clan has gotten what they wanted. In order to seize the sect's power, they didn't hesitate to become someone else's grandson. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi glanced at each other but didn't answer. Everyone knew that Jiang Shanghong and Jiang clan weren't on good terms. Besides, the clan's aura-refining disciples basically didn't know about this kind of matter. Most likely, when Jiang Shanghong found out about it, his mood would be far more complicated than others. Qin Shi pondered for a moment then said, "Aside from waiting, there's no other way. Junior apprentice Brother Su, raise your spirits. If there are any changes, it'll be easier to deal with them." How could Su Jingji not know? He just felt restless when he thought about his family in Yunwu sect. The three of them found a corner and slowly waited. After a night, a streak of light finally flashed across the horizon. This streak of light landed on the square. It was a core formation cultivator. After exchanging a few words with the guards, the man walked towards the Yunwu sect disciples and said, "All disciples, follow me back to Yunwu sect. You're not allowed to disobey my order." Mo Tiange and the other two looked hesitant when they heard what he said. Su Jingji whispered, "Could it be?" Both of them could guess what he wanted to say. Now that they were called back, it could only mean that the matter had been settled. It was unknown what they had done in order to seize power in the sect. Qin Shi remained calm and said, "We'll know once we go back and take a look." Mo Tiange nodded. "Senior brother Su, let's go back first." Su Jingji nodded with a pale face. Several hundred Yunwu sect disciples boarded this core formation cultivator's flying magic weapon. When they came, they were restless because they were excited. Now that they were going back, they were still restless because they were frightened. Although Mo Tiange wasn't as worried as Su Jingji, she was also afraid they might hurt innocent people during the fight. If the fight of magical powers between core formation cultivators destroyed Mount Yunwu's market square, second uncle would be in danger. His heart was burning with anxiety, and the journey of a few hours was especially long. After an unknown amount of time, the gate of Mount Yunwu finally appeared below. When they landed on Yunwu sect's square, the core formation cultivator shouted, "All disciples, return to your immortal's caves. Don't go out at will." Naturally, no one dared to question him. The Yunwu sect disciples lowered their heads and left one after another. Even if they were worried about their family, they didn't dare to say anything. Mo Tiange glanced at the foot of the mountain. Everything seemed calm and there were no signs of fighting. Second uncle should be safe, right? When they returned to their residence, everyone didn't even have the mood to talk. They just sat in the small living room in a daze. Even Jiang Shanghong didn't return to his room. Like them, he was staring at the gate in a daze. They didn't know where Lu Yidao had gone. Even now, there was no trace of him. The longer Su Jingji waited, the more anxious he became. He stood up and started walking in circles in the living room. Jiang Shanghong finally slammed the teacup in his hand on the table with a loud bang and said in a rough voice, "Stop walking." This sentence gave Su Jingji a breakthrough in his depressed mood. He immediately stood still. His eyes seemed to be spitting fire. After a long time, he finally straightened his neck and said, "What did you say?" Jiang Shanghong said in a muffled voice, "You're making me dizzy." Su Jingji paused for a while then suddenly took a step forward. He gnashed his teeth and said, "You still dare to talk. It's all your Jiang clan's fault. As elders of Yunwu sect, you actually colluded with outsiders. You still have the face to talk?" Jiang Shanghong's complexion turned pale, but in the next second he stood up with a flushed face. "What does it have to do with me? What kind of people do you think the others are? It's your Su clan. It's just that you don't have the ability. Otherwise, who knows who would have betrayed you?" "You." Su Jingji's expression changed greatly. He rushed forward, grabbed Jiang Shanghong's collar and was about to punch him. How could Jiang Shanghong be willing to show weakness? Without saying a word, the two of them started to fight. Mo Tiange's mind was in a mess, but seeing them like this, she had no choice but to stop them. However, she still had misgivings and didn't dare to have too much contact with them. Since she couldn't pull them away, she could only cast a pleading gaze towards Qin Shi, who was still sitting motionlessly. Qin Shi shook his head at her. Mo Tiange didn't understand. What does he mean? Don't care? Qin Shi sighed and pointed at the seat next to him. He waited until she hesitantly came over and sat down before he said, "The two of them are in a bad mood. It's good for them to vent their feelings by fighting. Don't worry. You see, they aren't using any spiritual aura, so they can't hurt anyone." Really? She turned around and saw that the two of them had finally gotten into a tussle. They were punching and kicking like mortals in the secular world, completely disorderly. After a long time, the two of them were tired and finally stopped. However, both of them were badly battered and gasping for breath. Mo Tiange sighed and helped Su Jingji up. "Senior Martial Brother Su, I won't help you treat your injuries. You should look at yourself in the mirror." Su Jingji sat on a chair and smiled bitterly. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, you're still telling jokes at this time? What can I do if I don't tell jokes?" Mo Tiange stared at the tranquil scene outside the room. "We can't do anything." Right at that moment, someone hurriedly walked into the courtyard. Su Jingji was pleasantly surprised. "It's Senior Martial Brother Lu." Everyone crowded around him. Lu Yidao was startled the moment he entered the room. Su Jingji couldn't help but ask, "Senior Martial Brother Lu, what happened? Where did you go?" Lu Yidao looked at them and smiled bitterly. "I was left behind in Xianxia sect and just came back." He saw the bruises on Su Jingji's and Jiang Shanghong's faces. "Junior Martial Brothers, what happened?" "Qin," she said, "Senior Martial Brother Lu, you don't need to worry. They're just having an argument. I wonder if Senior Martial Brothers saw the situation outside when you came back?" Lu Yidao looked at the two of them hesitantly and answered, "Junior Martial Brothers, you don't need to worry. There's no big change in the sect. However, in the next few days, we'd better not go out. I heard they're going to carry out a purge of Yunwu sect's forces. We'd better not get involved." "Is that so?" Su Jingji smiled bitterly. "I wonder how my family is. If there's nothing going on, they should have sent us a message." Lu Yidao comforted him. "Junior Martial Brother Su, don't worry. Cultivation clans are the foundation of cultivation groups. As long as your family doesn't resist, nothing will happen." Although he said that, Su Jingji still couldn't help but worry. Although Jiang Shanghong wasn't worried about his family, his mood became even worse when he heard this news. Without saying a word, he went back to his room and slammed the door with a loud bang. Mo Tiange stared outside the room with a heavy heart. Sure enough, they're going to carry out a purge? It seemed that under this tranquility, Yunwu sect was really going to be bathed in blood. Chapter 61. Several days later, Yunwu sect officially changed its name to Xianxia sect's Mount Yunwu branch. As soon as she regained her freedom, Mo Tiange went down the mountain to see if second uncle was doing well and then told him about this matter. In the past few days, Yi Jiang had already understood everything. He only said to her, "Just concentrate on cultivating. You don't need to care about this kind of thing. As long as you can build your foundation, it doesn't matter which cultivation group you're in." In all fairness, Mo Tiange didn't have any feelings for cultivation groups. In the past 10 years, it was second uncle who took her to wander around, devoted himself to raising her. Yunwu sect didn't do anything for her, and she didn't have too many feelings for Yunwu sect either. In the entire celestial pole or in the entire cultivation world, most people were this practical. Now that she was in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, she could already abstain from eating, so she simply stayed in her room to stabilize her cultivation level and study formations. She hadn't had time to study the Qimen Duanjia she obtained in Miwu Valley 2 years ago. Now was the perfect time to carefully study it. During the time she stayed in her room, the influence of the annexation of the sect became greater and greater. Xianxia sect sent several core formation cultivators to take over. Now, there was no sect head of Yunwu sect, only the master of Mount Yunwu, and the master of this branch was precisely the core formation cultivator from Jiang clan. Of course, this didn't have much to do with Jiang Shanghong. He wasn't close to his sect and had a grudge against Jiang Chengxian. It was already good enough that he wasn't bullied, so how could he enjoy any special treatment? Apart from Jiang clan, none of the other core formation cultivators escaped this calamity. Even their clans were implicated. Moreover, most of the sect's disciples came from cultivation clans. Because of threats and promises, disciples died every day because of this, causing everyone to live in fear every day. Normally, the individual cultivators who entered the sect through the Immortal's assembly shouldn't be affected too much, but several disciples were implicated and died. Fortunately, Su Jingji wasn't among them. Later, Imotienga heard that Wang Qianyi married a junior of a core formation cultivator from Xianxia sect and went to Xianxia sect. Because of this, Wang clan was spared and was no longer investigated. Imotienga could only sigh about this. As a woman, her body was her last asset. Senior martial sister Wang was a proud woman. Although her father was a foundation-building cultivator, she was never proud and always treated others kindly. But in the end, she couldn't protect herself. Imotienga recalled when she ran into Shenbing and Imotienga in Miwu Valley. Imotienga mentioned that she was verbally harassed by Shenbing. Although Shenbing was angry, she tolerated it, but Imotienga cursed at her. Imotienga also recalled that today, she was forced to marry the hedonistic son of a rich family she despised the most. She really had no control over her own fate. After a while, she heard that Shenbing was forced to become sect head Li's son's concubine. Senior sister Shenbing had always been famous for her beauty in the three sections. Many of the disciples of the three sects had fallen under her skirt. She was not surprised at all that she had fallen into such a situation. Beauty was wealth, but it was also a curse. If she hadn't disguised herself as a man and stopped showing her womanly side, she probably wouldn't have had a good ending today. Later, Yan's Mo Li's sect, Sex Yen, sect, Yen Yen as, Mo Xia sex Li's cities well as she could. As she said Mu's Mu. Qing Mu is Qing Mu. Apart from replying with a blessing summoning amulet, there was nothing else she could do. Several months later, the storm of annexing the two sects gradually subsided. When Imotienga came out of her room and saw the three of them in the small living room, she couldn't help but feel a bit surprised. What's going on? Lu Yidao beckoned her over. Junior martial brother Yi, come over and let's have a chat. Filled with questions, he walked over and found a chair to sit on. Imotienga really didn't believe Qin she was fine. Lu Yidao and Su Jingji were extroverted, so it was normal for them to gather and chat when they had nothing to do. However, Qin she never left his room unless he had something to do. The reason he stayed outside was either because he had something to do or because he was interested in a topic. Lu Yidao excitedly asked, Junior martial brother Yi, you still don't know about the news that just came out, right? What news? Lu Yidao mysteriously paused for a moment before continuing, news about foundation building pills. Imotienga almost forgot about this matter. After the sect's extermination, she also forgot about the minor competition that was supposed to be held several months ago. What's wrong? Are they going to hold the minor competition again? Lu Yidao shook his head, feeling extremely excited. I heard that in order to appease the sect's disciples, they're going to increase the distribution of foundation-building pills and change the method of distribution. Method? What method? Are we not going to hold the minor competition anymore? Lu Yidao nodded. Yes, the minor competition this time is cancelled. Imotienga didn't understand. Then what method are they going to use? Su Jingji, who had been silent the whole time, coldly snorted and said, Isn't it because too many people died this time? If we hold the minor competition, it'll be too cold and cheerless, so they're changing the method. Su Jingji's mood had always been bad. Although their Su clan wasn't implicated, they weren't having a good time either. Su Jingji originally had an uncle in the foundation-building realm, but because he was close to sect head Fong, he was demoted back to the clan. Fortunately, he expressed his stance quickly, so he didn't implicate other people. Coupled with Shenbing's and Wang Qianyi's experiences, Su Jingji, who was also a descendant of a cultivation clan, was filled with hatred. Upon seeing his reaction, Qin she coughed and said, Junior martial brother Su, it's better for you to calm down a bit. No matter what happened in the past, Xianxia sect is hanging over our heads now. Su Jingji's expression stiffened, but in the end, he still agreed. How could he not know this? However, His life had been smooth ever since he was a child. Aside from the Immortals' assembly, he had never encountered such a depressing matter, so he didn't hide his emotions. Lu Yidao felt very embarrassed after being interrupted. Su Jingji's mood wasn't right, yet he was so excited. He immediately restrained his emotions and said, "I heard the demonic beasts in the depths of Kunwu mountain range are getting restless again, and the small demonic beasts in the vicinity are also frequently injuring people. Therefore, the sect has decided to reward us according to the number of demonic beasts we catch in Mount Yunwu within a day. The first few dozen disciples will be qualified to receive foundation-building pills." "Is that so?" Emo Tiange frowned. In the depths of the south of Kunwu was a dense forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. Reportedly, there were many high-level demonic beasts there, but in the vicinity of the sect, there were generally only first and second-rank demonic beasts. The first rank was equivalent to the aura-refining realm, while the second rank was equivalent to the early stage of the foundation-building realm. As long as aura-refining disciples were careful, they could deal with first-rank demonic beasts. As for second-rank demonic beasts, although it was a bit difficult, demonic beasts didn't know how to use talismans and didn't know many spells, so they could still be killed if many people ganged up on them. Even if they couldn't kill them, they could still run away. However, although this method sounded good, it wasn't like the minor competition where even if they were strong enough, one of them would meet a tragic end if they met a similar opponent. But after careful consideration, it was actually a preferential treatment for cultivation clans because they had a lot of manpower. When the time came, they could concentrate on one person and obtain a foundation-building pill. As for the other disciples, who would be willing to sacrifice themselves for others? After all, if there were spoils of war, there would be rewards. "Can we go together?" Lu Yidao shook his head. "This time, we won't be competing in Miwu Valley. Disciples will be competing with each other. Of course, if we run into each other inside, we'll presumably be allowed to move together. However, the chances of that happening are really low. The mountain forest is too big." Emo Tiange was calculating in her heart. This method had both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that she didn't need to be afraid of being seen by others, so she could just use whatever methods she had. The disadvantage was that she had to be extra careful. After all, if she wasn't careful when fighting demonic beasts, she might end up dying in their mouths. Chapter 62. The vast forest stretched as far as the eye could see. It was verdant and lush, stretching for thousands of miles. Emo Tiange stood on top of a high cliff, silently watching. This was the southern end of Kunwu mountain range, a part of the forest. Countless demonic beasts lived here. Some were tamed by cultivators and became spiritual beasts, but most of them lived freely in this forest, cultivating and taking human forms. It was said that in the innermost part of the forest, near the sea, lived many demonic beasts that had already taken human forms. They generally didn't go out of the forest, but every once in a while, they couldn't help but want to order low-level demonic beasts to attack and occupy the areas where human cultivators lived. Of course, they couldn't occupy those areas under normal circumstances. However, they could obtain a lot of medicinal pills to help their cultivation every time they came here, so they were very happy. Every time this happened, it was a gamble. Sometimes the human cultivators suffered heavy losses, but sometimes they obtained a lot of good demonic beast corpses to be used as tool refining materials. Emo Tiange had never encountered this kind of situation. She was only a low-level cultivator and had only been in Kunwu for 10 years. The last time she fought against demonic beasts was at least 50 or 60 years ago. Standing on this high cliff with her were a core formation cultivator, more than 10 foundation building cultivators, and several hundred aura refining cultivators. The consequences of Xianxia sect annexing Yunwu sect could already be seen. In the last minor competition, Yunwu sect had more than 400 disciples in the 7th layer or above, but now, there were probably less than 300, maybe even fewer. Among these cultivators, Emo Tiange didn't see many familiar figures. Senior martial brother Zhou didn't come because, with his cultivation level in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm, he would definitely get a share of the foundation-building pills. Since the sect had just suffered a disaster, he didn't want to attract attention, so he simply didn't participate. Wang Qianyi and Xinbing also didn't come. The two of them went to Xianxia sect's main branch, and it was said that they had already decided to get a share of the foundation-building pills. Because of this, Immortal felt a little better. At least the two of them weren't making unnecessary sacrifices. Yen, on the other hand, came. She looked pale and skinny, standing alone in the crowd. Her face was expressionless, and her original beauty was completely gone. Seeing her appearance, Immortal sighed in her heart. This was also good. At least, she wouldn't follow in Wang Qianyi and Xinbing's footsteps. Not long after, another group of people flew over from the horizon and landed on this flat cliff. They were Jindao School's disciples. Just like Yunwu sect, although they didn't change the color of their clothes, they added the symbol of Xianxia sect. At a rough glance, there were only about 100 Jindao School disciples. Apparently, they had also gone through a purge. Everyone had a distracted expression on their faces. Fighting over foundation-building pills was something like that, yet none of them looked excited. Obviously, what they saw was even more miserable than what Yunwu sect's disciples experienced. The core formation cultivator leading them was a Daoist priest dressed in secular clothes. Because of this, Immortal stared at him a few more times. Although the righteous cultivators in the immortal cultivation world all practiced Dao techniques, many of them dressed as Daoists, which was different from the secular world. Most of the Daoists in the secular world wore cyan or dark blue buttoned robes, which were thick and heavy without any sense of hierarchy. Daoist robes in the cultivation world, on the other hand, were mostly beautified. Dark blue robes, buttoned robes, and plain robes were layered with innate trigrams and taiji cloud patterns. Their colors were also distinguished, making them look elegant yet dignified. Compared to the Daoists in the secular world, Daoists appeared even more elegant and graceful. Therefore, they rarely wore secular Daoist robes because they couldn't show the temperament of cultivators. The Daoist in front of her was obviously a core formation cultivator, but he didn't care about what he wore at all. It was obvious that he had a firm Dao heart. Once this person arrived, the current branch master of Yunwu Mountain greeted him enthusiastically. Senior Martial Brother Lin, long time no see. This Daoist didn't give him any face. He only let out a soft "f," then closed his eyes to rest. Branch Master Jiang was snubbed, so he looked a little embarrassed. Immortal saw that some of the Yunwu sect disciples, such as Su Jingji, were secretly pleased. Jiang Shanghong, on the other hand, looked annoyed. It seemed he couldn't bear to see his elder's behavior. He stared at a cultivator next to Branch Master Jiang, hatred flashing across his face. Immortal realized that person was Jiang Chengxian, a disciple of Jiang clan who once bullied her. This Jiang Chengxian seemed to be Branch Master Jiang's direct descendant. He always followed Branch Master Jiang, and there was a complacent expression on his face. Although Immortal wasn't close to Jiang Shanghong, upon seeing the scene, she still somewhat despised Jiang Chengxian. He was a hedonistic son of a rich family who relied on his blood relationship with his elder to commit outrages. He didn't concentrate on cultivating and didn't have any real skills. It was no wonder Jiang Shanghong didn't like him. After a while, another group of people flew over from the horizon. The number of people was much more than the number of their two groups. They were Xianxia sect's disciples. The cultivator who led Xianxia sect's group was rather good-natured. He was also indifferent to Branch Master Jiang, but he was very polite to that Daoist. After the three of them talked for a while, they each used their magic weapons. In an instant, a transporting formation appeared out of thin air. It seemed to be the same technique as the one in Miwu Valley. Presumably, it had been used to test the disciples before. All disciples, go in one by one. No pushing. After experiencing the calamity that befell their sect, the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school were naturally quiet. On the other hand, Xianxia sect's disciples were beaming with joy and rushed to go in first. The disciples of the other two groups also didn't care and just waited. Immortal looked left and right. Among her fellow martial brothers, Lu Yidao was itching to try, Su Jingji had a calm expression, Qin Shi still had a calm expression, and Jiang Shanghong had a deep frown on his face. She touched her face and felt that it was a bit stiff, so she slowed down her breathing and adjusted her mentality. She was determined to obtain the foundation-building pill. In the future, if she couldn't stand Xianxia sect's way of doing things, she could find an excuse to leave the mountain and never come back. Xianxia sect didn't have time to care about a low-level disciple. Before that, it would be best if she could obtain the foundation-building pill in the sect and build her foundation. Otherwise, with only her aura-refining cultivation level and second uncle's lifespan approaching its end, she wouldn't dare to casually leave. As her imagination ran wild, she suddenly noticed that Su Jingji, who was the closest to her, seemed to be trembling. Mo Tiange called out in a low voice, "Senior Martial Brother Su?" Su Jingji turned his head. His face was so pale that he was sweating profusely. His voice was also trembling slightly. Mo Tiange sighed. "We haven't gone in yet. Don't collapse." Upon hearing what she said, Su Jingji hastily wiped his sweat and pretended that nothing had happened. "Junior Martial Brother Yi doesn't need to worry." "Even if I worry, I won't be able to," Mo Tiange said. "You have to be alert. This forest is very dangerous and we can't travel together." Su Jingji nodded. After a long time, he seemed to still be in a bad mood. He whispered to her, "Junior Martial Brother Yi, I'm really worried. Our three groups obviously have a grudge against each other. If we go into the forest like this, won't there be some kind of conflict?" Mo Tiange was puzzled. "Why?" Su Jingji was silent for a long time. All of a sudden, he said through clenched teeth, "If I run into that Jiang Chengxian, if I can clean him up, I'll—" A fierce look flashed across his face. She knew what he meant. Mo Tiange was startled. She turned her head around and saw that no one was paying attention to them. She then said in a low voice, "Senior Martial Brother Su, you mustn't talk nonsense. You're too nervous." Su Jingji closed his eyes and nodded. He then wiped the sweat on his face and said, "Junior Martial Brother Yi is right." Right after he said that, he closed his eyes to rest, adjusting his breath and calming his mind. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then took out something from inside her robe and handed it to him. "Senior Martial Brother Su, this is a heart-calming talisman. If you can't control yourself, just stick it on your body." Su Jingji opened his eyes. Without saying anything, he accepted the talisman and said, "Thank you, Junior Martial Brother Yi." Mo Tiange smiled. She no longer said anything and just stared at the transporting formation. In just a short while, almost all the Xianxia sect disciples had left. She composed herself, then walked towards the transporting formation. Chapter 63. The transporting formation shone brightly. Without any hesitation, Mo Tiange slapped a defensive talisman on her body. This time, it was different from Miwu Valley. No matter what, Miwu Valley had been dealt with by the seniors of the three sections. Although there were still demonic beasts, there were only a few left. Moreover, there were some restrictions set up in the valley. As long as the disciples had the medallions, they wouldn't die. But in this forest, it was hard to say. If they really teleported to the front of the demonic beasts and got bitten, it would be fatal. Moreover, there was a turbulent undercurrent between the disciples of the three sections. In addition, there were some people who would forget what was right for the sake of profit. They might really lose their lives. Because she'd long anticipated that this trip would definitely be dangerous, she deliberately used some things to exchange with Qin Shi for some talismans. A while ago, Qin Shi had been practicing drawing talismans. Although he lost a lot of his talismans, he also made quite a few finished ones. Since he didn't like them, he said he had a lot left. So the other three people exchanged a lot of talismans with him. Mo Tiange didn't have many spirit stones left, so she used some materials to exchange with him. He didn't really care because he dabbled in both pill concocting and tool refining, so he accepted everything she offered. Mo Tiange was somewhat worried about preparing for the trial this time. She wasn't a wealthy cultivator, and all the spirit stones she needed for cultivation were obtained through rewards or transactions. Unfortunately, she didn't have a good aptitude, so the amount of spirit stones she needed to cultivate was quite a lot. It turned out that second uncle had sold his own belongings to prepare talismans and pills for her during the minor competition of the three sects. She really didn't have any other belongings. There were only about 100 or so spirit stones left, which were reserved for laying formations. There were also some spiritual plants, spiritual objects, and other materials, but most of them had already been exchanged for spirit stones, so the remaining ones couldn't be sold for much money. There were also too few talismans, so they couldn't be exchanged for spirit stones. In addition, there were a bunch of unknown things. Some of them were recognized by Qin Shi, so he exchanged them for talismans. As for the rest, he didn't know what they were. She remembered that she had obtained a bead from the man of the Yin clan. It was about the size of a child's fist. She could feel the surging spiritual qi in it, but no one could recognize what it was. In this way, only the spiritual weapons were still valuable. Most of them were obtained from the man from the Yin clan 3 years ago, so she didn't dare to sell them. However, this wasn't something she needed to worry about right now. At the very least, she had made sufficient preparations for this test. Once she was transported into the forest, Immortal immediately looked around. Fortunately, he didn't encounter any demonic beasts. She heaved a sigh of relief and took a step forward. The next moment, she missed her footing and fell straight down. She hurriedly used the light body technique, found a foothold and leaped up. This was a steep slope. Because there were too many vines, it looked like solid ground in front, but it was actually just vines attached to it. She slapped her forehead. It was really a false alarm. She had observed the surroundings but had forgotten to look under her feet. It seemed that she would have to pay more attention in the future. He was surrounded by dense trees and vines that crawled everywhere. Beneath his feet was a thick layer of dried leaves. It was very difficult to find a path. From inside her robe, Immortal took out a jade slip engraved with a map of this place. However, this map was too rough and there was no reference nearby, so she simply couldn't find it. She could only give up. She carefully restrained her breath, took out her greenwood sword, and walked through the forest. There was an advantage to being here, and that was that she cultivated a wood-attributed cultivation technique. In this forest, the wood qi was dense, and the power of her cultivation technique would be even greater. Suddenly, she felt a spiritual aura movement behind her. Immortal, who had been observing her surroundings attentively, immediately moved. She blocked with her greenwood sword and turned around to see her opponent. It was actually a brightly colored flat-headed demonic snake. In an instant, her hair stood on end. Even though she considered herself bold, she really wanted to vomit when facing such a snake. But now wasn't the time to vomit. This demonic snake's breath wasn't weak. If she didn't concentrate and died under its mouth, it would be even more disgusting. This snake was more than 10 feet long, as thick as the mouth of a bowl, with a flat head and a thin tongue. Its cold and gloomy eyes were directly staring at her. Judging from the breath it emitted, it was a first-rank demonic beast. In an instant, the snake jumped up and spat black venom towards her. At this time, the defensive talisman on her body took effect. The venom fell off before it could touch her body. After this attack, the defensive barrier on her body shook and was about to break. Immortal didn't dare to be careless, so she took out another defensive talisman and slapped it on her body. Then she took out her greenwood sword and attacked the snake's weak point. This demonic snake was very agile. It moved as fast as lightning. As it stretched and shrank, it tangled with greenwood sword. Immortal carefully controlled greenwood sword while taking out a handful of seeds from her qiankuan bag. Taking advantage of the fact that the snake was tangled with greenwood sword, she threw them out. The seeds fell on the snake's body. One by one, they grew into fire thorns, firmly entangling the demonic snake. She calmed down a little, but in the next second, she was so surprised that she almost shouted. The demonic snake stretched and shrank its body. The fire thorns entangling its body couldn't pierce its skin at all. Instead, it swung its tail and sent the thorns flying. Immortal's expression turned grave. The scales on this snake's skin were unexpectedly so hard that the thorns of the fire thorns couldn't pierce through. The demonic snake dodged Greenwood's sword and suddenly turned its head towards her. The tip of its tongue spat out wasn't venom, but fog. Xianxia felt dizzy. She was shocked. This must be poisonous fog. She didn't dare to be careless. While holding her breath, she took out a medicinal pill from her chinkuan bag and threw it into her mouth. As the medicinal power of the refreshing pill spread, her mind immediately became clear. She didn't dare to continue entangling with the snake, so she took out a talisman and threw it at the snake's body. A pillar of water soared into the sky and poured on the snake's body. Soon after, it froze into ice, and the demonic snake's body immediately slowed down. Greenwood's sword stabbed down. With a pew sound, the sword finally pierced through its scales and firmly nailed it 7 inches from its head. The demonic snake twisted a few times, but it couldn't break free from the ice or the Greenwood sword. In the end, it stopped breathing and stopped moving. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief. She retrieved her Greenwood sword and carefully wiped it clean. She regretfully looked at the ice on the demonic snake's body. This freezing talisman wasn't cheap. This forest was really dangerous everywhere. It was only a snake, but it actually put her in such a dangerous situation and even made her use an freezing talisman. Facing the snake's corpse on the ground, Xianxia was in a dilemma. During this trial, the elders of the school clearly told her to bring back the demonic beast's corpse. However, this snake looked really disgusting, so she couldn't do anything about it. After hesitating for a while, she took out a leather pouch from her chinkuan bag. With a flick of her Greenwood sword, she picked up the snake's corpse, fastened the mouth of the pouch, and threw it into her chinkuan bag. Once she finished doing all this, she once again restrained her breath, carefully identified her direction and went out of this forest. In the dense forest, a clear brook flowed through an open space in the forest, meandering downwards. Under the nourishment of this brook, the grassland on both sides was lush and the wildflowers were brilliant. It was indeed a beautiful scene in the wilderness. However, in this beautiful scene, there were 2 people who ruined it. One of them was wearing purple robes, and the other was wearing yellow robes. Their cuffs were embroidered with the same symbol. The 2 of them fiercely glared at each other. The purple-robed youth snorted and said angrily, "Jindao School's disciple, you actually dared to mount a sneak attack on me?" The yellow-robed middle-aged cultivator's expression didn't change. He said faintly, "Yellow-haired brat, so what if I mount a sneak attack on you?" Angered by his unmoved attitude, the youth's face twisted. I'm a disciple of Xianxia sect's main branch. Aren't you afraid of being punished by your school?" The middle-aged cultivator smiled faintly. "If I did everything cleanly, who would be able to trace it back to me?" The youth was seething with anger. Presumably, he didn't have enough experience and hadn't experienced any setbacks in his cultivation, so he was easily provoked. He immediately manipulated the spirit tool in his hand and rushed towards the middle-aged cultivator. The middle-aged cultivator cautiously took a step back. While manipulating the spirit tool, he secretly took out a talisman. Both of them were in the 10th layer. For a moment, they were evenly matched as they fought back and forth. Right at this moment, another person came out of the forest. This time, he was wearing black robes. When he saw the 2 people fighting, his expression changed. After a long time, he finally took out an object from his chinkuan bag and threw it towards one of them. Following the sound of the brook, several spiritual aura fluctuations attracted her attention. She carefully hid her tracks and walked towards the place where the fight was taking place. On the meadow beside the brook, 2 disciples from Xianxia sect and Jindao school were fighting. In the corner of the forest, a Yunwu sect disciple with a ferocious expression threw the spirit tool in his hand. With a blood-curdling scream, that Xianxia sect disciple lay in a pool of blood, no longer breathing. The disciples of Jindao school and Yunwu sect both heaved sighs of relief. The 2 of them didn't fight or talk. They just divided the Xianxia sect disciple's belongings, burned his corpse with a fire, and then went their separate ways. Xianxia hid herself in the forest, drenched in cold sweat. What Su Jingji was worried about finally happened. The disciples of Jindao school and Yunwu sect, who harbored hatred in their hearts, killed the lone Xianxia sect disciple to vent their hatred. She could imagine what would happen next. Those who killed Xianxia sect disciples couldn't help but attack again. If they attacked too many times, Xianxia sect disciples would discover that their fellow disciples were killed. In their anger, they would retaliate against the two groups. The disciples of the three groups would then fight each other, resulting in countless casualties. This trial was indeed full of dangers. Not only did she have to guard against the demonic beasts in the forest, but she also had to worry about other cultivators. After spending a long time to calm down, Immortal once again set foot on the road. Even if she was worried, it was useless. She could only carefully avoid them because the formation at the exit would only open after one day, and she was determined to obtain the foundation building pill. Chapter 64. Once she found the stream, Immortal could finally distinguish her position on the map. Then, in order to deliberately avoid others, she carefully studied a route. Fortunately, the information stated roughly what was in each place, and each disciple had a copy of the map. By finding a place that no one liked, she could naturally avoid most people. If someone was unlucky enough to be teleported to that place, he or she would probably leave. The place she found was dangerous in the eyes of ordinary people. There were cliffs, abysses, and a poisonous spring that emitted poisonous fog all year round. The map indicated that this place wasn't good. It wasn't easy to walk, and there weren't any demonic beasts that were easy to kill. However, there were some demonic monkeys that lived in groups, which were quite troublesome. Immortal thought about it. It wasn't easy to walk, so she just had to be careful. After all, she wasn't an ordinary person, so she wouldn't encounter any accidents. As for those demonic monkeys that lived in groups, they were suitable for her. She was good at formations, and first-rank demonic beasts couldn't recognize them. She just needed to find a suitable place to lay a disorienting formation and lure the monkeys inside. Then, she wouldn't be afraid no matter how many monkeys there were. After making up her mind, she walked smoothly. Although her breath-concealing technique wasn't brilliant, the divine sense of an aura-refining cultivator wasn't strong, so very few people could detect her. Soon, she arrived at the place indicated on the map. Immortal took a look and unconsciously frowned. This place was indeed as the information said. It was a disgusting place. Probably because of the poisonous spring, there was poisonous fog as soon as she approached. The shrubs were so dense that there wasn't even a path, and most of them were poisonous. It was obviously daytime, but this place was gray and overcast. She couldn't see the sky at all. Without a better choice, Immortal could only brace herself and go. After sweeping this area with her divine sense, she had a general understanding of the terrain and also found the position of the demonic monkeys. There were many faint spiritual aura fluctuations on the edge of the poisonous spring. The divine sense of an aura-refining cultivator wasn't strong, so it was difficult to sense the spiritual aura fluctuations of a single low-rank demonic beast. However, when they gathered together, it was very easy to distinguish them. She swallowed a refreshing pill to prevent the poisonous fog from affecting her. Then, she laid a simple disorienting formation and a spirit-trapping formation in a place that wasn't too far from her. As its name suggested, the spirit-trapping formation's main function was to make people lose their way. Once they entered the formation, they would keep walking in circles and couldn't get out. The spirit-trapping formation's purpose was to deal with people or beasts with spiritual aura. Once they entered the formation, their spiritual aura would run slower. Generally, this formation would be placed in cultivators' caves to prevent others from breaking in. These two formations were not enough. After thinking for a while, she set up another 5 elements life and death formation. This formation was more troublesome than the previous two, but she had been studying the formation book some time ago and had modified this formation. It could be used for both offense and defense, so it was safer to use it. After MOG's spiritual aura state, she adjusted it, she to defend, to be, and to MO she to, she to, Mo and to her. She to in to her to the spirit. Mo spirit to mo demon. First-rank demonic beasts weren't much smarter than ordinary beasts. They didn't know how to think and acted according to their instincts. Soon, their figures appeared in the poisonous fog. Sensing the sudden provocative aura, these demonic monkeys pounced towards Mo Tianga's location without the slightest hesitation. However, before they could even get close to her, they began to run in circles. The group of monkeys formed a circle and chased each other, running in circles from head to tail. It looked interesting, but Mo Tianga didn't dare to be careless. She waved the formation flag in her hand. The formation was instantly filled with quicksand and fire. The group of monkeys squeaked. They ran left and right, but they couldn't escape no matter how hard they tried. They were burned by the fire, so they ran and trampled on each other. Mo Tianga waved the formation flag again. Many stones fell from the formation. The group of monkeys had nowhere to hide and died under the stones. Mo Tianga breathed a sigh of relief when all the demonic monkeys were killed. Aura-refining cultivators wouldn't be able to deal with so many first-rank demonic beasts if they hadn't set traps in advance. Although they were successfully killed, she still spent a lot of spiritual aura. The ability of aura-refining cultivators was too low. They couldn't use multiple spirit tools at the same time, nor could they maintain a fight of magical power for a long time. Even magic weapons without cultivation level restrictions couldn't display much of their power. The more she cultivated, the more eager she was to build her foundation. After recovering her spiritual aura, Mo Tianga stood up and cleaned up the mess. There were about 20 to 30 monkeys in the group just now. Presumably, there would be a chaotic fight in this mountain forest, so the number of demonic beasts they killed wouldn't be many. These demonic beasts were enough to exchange for a foundation-building pill. Therefore, after stuffing the corpses of the demonic monkeys into her Qiankuan bag, she sat in the formation and meditated. She didn't plan to kill any more demonic beasts. Her goal was only to obtain a foundation-building pill. She didn't want to lose her life, nor did she want to be in the limelight. While she was meditating leisurely, a monstrous wave was set off in this mountain forest. The first Xianxia sect disciple who was killed wasn't discovered, but it wasn't just one or two people who had this idea. Soon, other people also made their moves. Xianxia sect disciples were numerous and powerful. They also felt that these two groups were exterminated, so how could they be willing to give up? By the afternoon, the fight had already been brought to the surface. Although the total number of Yunwu sect and Jindao school's disciples wasn't as many as Xianxia sect's disciples, they harbored hatred in their hearts. Moreover, they usually launched sneak attacks and succeeded quite a few times. However, when Xianxia sect disciples finally reacted, both sides began to have victories and defeats. As more and more people were killed, they basically didn't care about anything else and started fighting as soon as they saw each other. Mo Tianga didn't know any of this. Fortunately, she came to this place. Otherwise, she would have probably also been involved in the fight. The sky gradually darkened, but Mo Tianga didn't do anything. She just sat in the middle of the formation. She couldn't light the lamp or it would attract other people. Even if she didn't attract other people, it wouldn't be good to fight at night if some demonic beast came. In any case, she could still see a little. She only needed to endure this night because the exit formation would be open tomorrow. Suddenly, she wrinkled her brows and raised her head. Spiritual aura fluctuations were coming from outside. Someone seemed to be coming here. After pondering for a moment, she slightly tidied up the formation she laid, leaving behind the 5 elements life and death formation. She then hid herself and carefully paid attention to that person. That person stumbled as he ran. His steps were weak and he fell from time to time, but he still managed to run all the way to this place. But all of a sudden, he seemed to bump into something. With a bang, there was no sound. Even after a long time, she still couldn't hear any sound. Mo Tianga pondered for a moment, then came out of her hiding place and cautiously felt her way over. She had always been cautious. Now that she had a defensive spell on her body and greenwood sword in her hand, she could deal with this person even if he suddenly launched an attack. Therefore, she decided to go and take a look. Not far from her, there was a person lying motionless on the ground. The sky was too dark, so she couldn't see him clearly. She could only vaguely see that he was wearing black clothes. Tiange felt a bit relieved. She went over to take a look. Sure enough, it was a young Yunwu sect disciple. Senior martial brother, senior martial brother. She gently pushed the person. After a long time, the person finally reacted. He raised his head with difficulty and said in a low voice, "Junior martial sister, help me." Tiange was dumbfounded. Junior martial sister? Before she could think of anything, the person's head tilted to one side and he fainted again. After thinking for a moment, she still helped the person into the formation she laid. She didn't know this person. Yunwu sect had so many aura refining disciples, but she only knew a few of them. Even the people in the other rooms in the courtyard only looked familiar to her, so she didn't remember this person at all. However, since they were both Yunwu sect disciples and there wasn't any trouble, she could lend him a hand. She then inserted her spiritual aura into the person's body to examine his injuries. After circulating her spiritual aura through the person's meridians, Tiange felt a bit relieved. The injuries on his body were very serious, but his meridians weren't damaged, so it was actually easy. After thinking for a moment, she took out medicinal pills from inside her robe and fed him a refreshing pill to prevent the poisonous fog from entering his body. She then fed him an aura-nourishing pill. A refreshing pill was only an ordinary antidote pill, it wasn't a precious medicine. As for healing medicinal pills, she did have small reversion pills on her, but they were expensive. Even foundation-building cultivators could use them. Giving them to an aura-refining cultivator she didn't know would be a bit wasteful. Besides, she didn't know this person at all, so giving him something precious was a bit too kind. Kindness had to be done appropriately to make people feel grateful and not greedy. This was the principle's second uncle taught her. Not long after, the man groaned and seemed to have woken up. Tiange said, "Senior martial brother, are you feeling better?" The person opened his eyes, struggled to sit up and forced a smile. "Junior martial brother? Thank you. If I didn't run into you, I would have lost my life today." Tiange said faintly, "Senior martial brother, you don't have to be so polite. It was nothing." The person nodded and took out a jade bottle from inside his robe. After swallowing several medicinal pills, he handed the jade bottle to Tiange. "I don't dare to let junior martial brother suffer any losses." Tiange didn't stand on ceremony and took the bottle. This was also a rule in the cultivation world. First, no one was willing to help others and lose their belongings. Second, people who received favors from others didn't want to owe them favors. Upon seeing her taking the bottle, the person asked, "Junior martial brother, where is this place? Is it safe?" Tiange said, "This is the poisonous spring in the northwest." The person must have known about this place, so he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "That's good. Presumably, no one will come here." After a pause, he greeted her again. "Amurongzi. May I ask how I should address junior martial brother?" Since he said, "I am," instead of "I'm," he was obviously a well-known figure among aura-refining disciples. Tiange had indeed heard of this name before. Murongzi was the disciple who persisted until the end with senior martial brother Zhou and the others in Miwu Valley's trial 2 years ago. At the same time, he was also Murong Yan's clan brother. Together with her, he became a disciple of the foundation-building cultivator Lin Qingwan. He was the senior martial brother Murong Yan mentioned who guarded the medicinal garden and provided seeds. This senior martial brother was indeed quite famous among the aura-refining disciples. Because she and Murong Yan could be considered friends, Tiange was a bit polite. "So it's senior martial brother Murong. My name is Yi Xiaotian. I'm an old acquaintance of senior martial sister Murong." Murongzi let out a soft, then said, "So it's you. I heard Xiaoyan mention you before." He looked her up and down, then revealed a smile. "No wonder I thought you were a junior martial sister in a daze just now." Tiange originally had doubts, so she naturally asked, "Why is that?" Murongzi pursed his lips and said with a smile, Because Xiaoyan said it's a pity you're a man. Your figure and appearance are more suitable to be a woman. Mo Tiange was instantly speechless. Aside from Su Jingji, Murongyan also liked to tease her. She said she was thin and small and had a girlish appearance, so it would be good if she was a woman and so on. When she thought of Murongyan, she couldn't help but sigh. The Murongyan who loved to laugh and play around had already disappeared. Murongzi noticed something was wrong with her expression and thought she didn't like people saying she had a girlish appearance, so he changed the topic. Junior martial brother Yi, did you meet anyone from Xianxia sect here? Mo Tiange shook her head. Judging from Murongzi's expression, something seemed to have happened, so she asked, did senior martial brother Murong encounter something? This question made Murongzi sigh. He then said, Junior martial brother Yi, you've always been here, so you probably don't know the disciples of the three groups have already started fighting. In fact, Mo Tiange had long foreseen this, but she didn't say it out loud and just pretended she didn't know. Really? What's going on? I don't know how it started. At first, it was just a private fight, but later on, it turned into a chaotic fight. We joined forces with Jindao School and were already fighting against Xianxia sect. Originally, I didn't want to get involved, but as long as I ran into people from Xianxia sect, they would take the initiative to attack me. I had no choice but to protect myself. Just now, I was killing a demonic wolf, but I was sneak attacked by someone. It wasn't easy for me to escape. Speaking up to this point, he had a worried expression on his face. It's so chaotic now. I don't know how Xiaoyan is doing. She used to always be lazy, so fights of magical power are really... Upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange also felt a bit worried. Although Lu Yidao and Qin Shi were experienced in fights of magical power, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. Su Jingji's cultivation level was also ordinary. Although he was a descendant of a cultivation clan and definitely had several treasures, it was hard to say if he encountered a strong enemy. Murongyan was the most worrisome. She never liked cultivating, and the reason her cultivation level was so high was all because she ate medicinal pills. Her own abilities were really mediocre. The two of them looked at each other in silence for a while. Murongzi forced himself to smile. Junior martial brother Yi, I'll take advantage of you. Let me stay here too. My injuries really can't be healed in a short time. Mo Tiange nodded. This place isn't mine. Anyone can come here. Senior martial brother Murong doesn't need to be polite. Murongzi smiled, then began to meditate to heal his injuries. This place was very dangerous, so it was better for him to recover his spiritual aura as soon as possible. Chapter 65. Inside the poisonous fog, Mo Tiange and Murongzi were meditating quietly. Their surroundings were quiet. This was a rare moment of peace in this mountain forest. Aside from this, battles were also going on in different places. Although this mountain forest was vast, there were always people who ran into each other. If one of the parties was Xianxia sect, it would lead to a chaotic battle. Some people killed and some people were killed. At night, for safety's sake and to vent their anger, the disciples from both sides gathered together to search for opponents who were alone and kill them to prevent themselves from being killed. Murongzi seized the time to heal his injuries and restore his spiritual aura, while Mo Tiange was secretly on guard. Unlike her fellow disciples who came from cultivation clans and harbored hatred towards Xianxia sect, she didn't want to get involved in any disputes. She just wanted to quietly wait for the exit formation to open and exchange it for a foundation-building pill. Suddenly, she sensed a spiritual aura fluctuation in the air. Mo Tiange opened her eyes. Just as she was about to look at the poisonous spring behind her, she suddenly felt a gust of wind. She promptly pushed Murongzi away and rolled to the side. Her cautiousness saved 2 lives. In the next moment, the two of them widened their eyes and stared at the thing in front of them in astonishment. This demonic beast had a flat head, sharp teeth, and a bulging back like a small mountain. Its lower body was still in the poisonous spring, but the part that was exposed was enough for them to recognize what kind of demonic beast it was. Murongzi muttered, "Second-rank demonic beast, iron-teethed crocodile." Turns out there really is a second-rank demonic beast here. Tiange pulled him back and waved her hand, summoning formation flags. The place they were originally meditating was the 5 elements life and death formation she laid. As soon as the iron-teethed crocodile attacked, it entered the formation. Senior martial brother Murong, what's this? Murong Zi regained his composure and said with a frown, this is a second-rank demonic beast, equivalent to an early-stage foundation-building cultivator. We're no match for it. Before they could say anything else, the iron-teethed crocodile dashed forward and opened its mouth to bite them. The two of them hastily retreated. Tiange waved the formation flags, and the formation discs and flags she hid underground instantly stood up. The 5 elements life and death formation began to operate. The things around its body stood up with a pa sound. The iron-teethed crocodile seemed to be stunned for a moment. It blinked its small eyes, but its ability to think was not enough to understand what was happening in front of it. After pausing for a moment, it still rushed over, wanting to swallow the 2 little mosquitoes in front of it. But it failed. Vines instantly appeared beneath its feet and wrapped around its entire body, rendering it unable to move an inch. It angrily swung its tail, and the vines immediately broke. Cold sweat broke out on Tiange's forehead. This demonic beast's brute force is too strong. My formation won't be able to hold it for long. Murong Zi's complexion also turned pale. This bit of time isn't enough for us to run. Tiange once again waved the formation flag. Water and quicksand instantly appeared inside the formation, rapidly turning it into a swamp, once again trapping the iron-teethed crocodile. At the same time, he gritted his teeth and said, Senior brother Murong, I'll hold it back. You attack it. If we can't outrun it, we can only fight. Murong Zi hesitated for a moment before answering, if we don't fight now, it'll be too late. Tiange shouted, hurry up. I'll think of a way to hold it back so it won't attack you. You attack it as hard as you can. Infected by her attitude, Murong Zi clenched his teeth and said, all right. If worst comes to worst, we'll just fight it. 2 aura-refining cultivators definitely couldn't defeat a foundation-building cultivator, but a second-rank demonic beast without the ability to think or use magic weapons might be able to put up a fight. Murong Zi immediately summoned his flying sword, used the light body technique, and attacked. But in the next second, his complexion turned unsightly. His flying sword was a gift from an elder in his school. It was even infused with rare iron essence, so it was incomparably sharp. Usually, it had a lot of advantages in fights of magical power, but against this iron-teethed crocodile's thick skin, it unexpectedly didn't have the slightest effect. After the swamp couldn't hold the iron-teethed crocodile any longer, Tiange once again waved her sword, causing a raging fire to appear inside the formation. At the same time, she took out a handful of bewitching flower seeds and threw them at the crocodile. Although the fire stopped the crocodile, the bewitching flower only made it wave its tail. With her current spiritual aura, the seeds she could use could only grow in a short period of time. However, second-rank demonic beasts already didn't care about these kinds of seeds. With no other choice, she took out a handful of restorative panaceas. Using a formation to trap a second-rank demonic beast consumed too much spiritual aura, so she had no choice but to consume panaceas to drag it down. On the other side, Murong Zi wasn't someone with an undeserved reputation. Once he saw that his flying sword was useless, he immediately swapped it for something else, a whip that glittered with a golden light. As soon as he swung the whip, it turned into a streak of golden light, emitting a loud pa. But after he swung it, Murong Zi's complexion changed again. This whip still couldn't break the iron-teethed crocodile's thick skin. After this happened a few times, Murong Zi's complexion turned ashen. Not only was he unable to break the iron-teethed crocodile's defense, but his spirit tool was also damaged by its bite. As expected of an iron-teethed crocodile, its teeth were extremely sharp. Tiange wasn't much better off. Although she was relying on the formation, her spiritual aura was being drained too quickly by manipulating this formation to resist the second-rank demonic beast's attack. She already felt that her spiritual aura was almost exhausted, so she had no choice but to grab a handful of restorative panaceas and stuff them into her mouth. With this kind of depletion speed, she was no longer afraid of wasting medicinal pills. If she couldn't survive, no matter how many medicinal pills she had, they would be useless. Use talismans. Use talismans to attack it. Emotienga shouted at the dumbfounded Murongzi. This iron-teethed crocodile had thick skin and thick flesh. The layer of hard skin on its body was comparable to armor, so she simply couldn't pierce it. She could only use spells to penetrate that layer of skin and injure it. Upon hearing her shout, Murongzi regained his senses. He took out a handful of talismans and, without any regard for the consequences, slammed them all onto the iron-teethed crocodile's head. These talismans contained spells of various elements. Sea of fire, ice, stones, quicksand, and vines, all of them smashed onto the iron-teethed crocodile's head. This time, the iron-teethed crocodile finally reacted. It raised its head and stared at Murongzi, who was flying in midair, with its small eyes. It then opened its mouth and sprayed a jet of water. Murongzi was greatly alarmed. He moved sideways with great difficulty to dodge, but he was careless and came in contact with some of the water. His body unexpectedly became sluggish and he fell to the ground. Taking advantage of this moment, Emotienga quickly took out the formation discs and formation flags for the disorienting formation and the spirit-trapping formation. She simply laid them down and soon after, she waved the formation flags. Vines once again appeared in the middle of the formation, firmly binding the iron-teethed crocodile. When the iron-teethed crocodile's attention returned to her side, it discovered that the spiritual aura inside its body had become slower. In a fit of rage, it couldn't care less about the other little bug and wanted to tear the bug in front of it to shreds. However, when it crawled forward, the scene in front of it changed. It actually couldn't find the existence of that little bug, so it immediately became confused. Seeing that Murongzi still hadn't crawled back up, Emotienga anxiously said, "Senior Martial Brother Murong." As if he heard her voice, Murongzi struggled to stuff several medicinal pills into his mouth and crawled back up with great difficulty. He was already seriously injured, so it was already very difficult for him to use spirit tools and light body technique. However, he was also hit by the iron-teethed crocodile's jet of water. This was a poisonous spring, so everything in the surroundings was poisonous, let alone a demonic beast that advanced to the second rank in this place. The iron-teethed crocodile's poison was much stronger than the poisonous fog, so his injuries became even more serious. Ignoring everything else, Murongzi swallowed several healing pills to neutralize the poison and struggled to fly up. With a wave of his hand, a handful of fine flying needles flew towards the iron-teethed crocodile's eye. The iron-teethed crocodile blinked and swung its head. Some of the flying needles were flung away, while the other needles pierced the thick skin on its head. Without the slightest reaction, the needles fell down one after another. Murongzi didn't give up and continued to throw the needles. Inside the spirit-trapping formation, the iron-teethed crocodile's spiritual aura circulation became slower. In the end, the iron-teethed crocodile didn't manage to dodge the needles. With a poo sound, its eye was pierced. It instantly became furious and let out a snoring sound while facing the sky. Emotienga was delighted. She immediately stuffed another handful of restorative panaceas into her mouth, then waved the formation flag. The sea of fire inside the formation smashed down, causing the ground to shake. After being attacked by several spells, the thick skin of the iron-teethed crocodile finally showed signs of being burnt. Murongzi didn't let this opportunity slip by. He once again took out his flying sword and stabbed it towards the burnt part of the iron-teethed crocodile's skin. This time, the sword stabbed solidly. It broke the iron-teethed crocodile's skin and pierced deeply into its flesh. Feeling the pain, the iron-teethed crocodile swung its tail and broke a big tree next to the spring. However, it still couldn't find where those annoying little bugs were. All it could see was the poisonous spring where it had lived for several hundred years. No matter how hard it crawled, it would always crawl back to its original spot. Blood flowed out of its eyes. Its body was in great pain from being hit by spells, and there was also something stuck in its flesh. It let out a painful grunt, but it still couldn't find those two little bugs. The only thing it could see was spells continuously smashing down on it. In the end, it couldn't hold on any longer. Another spell smashed down on it, and it could no longer open its eyes. Tiange gasped for breath. Her legs went soft, and she could no longer stand and knelt down. There wasn't even a trace of spiritual aura left in her body. A second-rank demonic beast was indeed much stronger than a first-rank demonic beast. She could kill those dozens of demonic monkeys without the slightest danger using the 5 elements life and death formation, but this second-rank demonic beast. She spent so much effort and ate so many medicinal pills, yet she could only trap it. If it weren't for Murongzi's help, it would have died for sure today. Murongzi lay motionless not too far from her. Just now, he practically threw out all of his talismans. Once the iron-teethed crocodile died, he fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Tiange was a bit worried. She once again swallowed a restorative panacea, barely recovering some of her spiritual aura. She then stood up with difficulty and dragged her heavy legs towards Murongzi. Senior Martial Brother Murong. Senior Martial Brother Murong. Murongzi lay motionlessly on the ground. There was a blood stain on the corner of his mouth. Obviously, he vomited because his injuries were too heavy. Tiange clenched her teeth, took out a small reversion pill and stuffed it into his mouth. Right now, although she wasn't injured, her spiritual aura was completely exhausted. If any danger appeared in the short term, it would be troublesome. It was better to save his life first. After all, it would always be safer if the two of them were together. After feeding him the small reversion pill, Murongzi finally slowly regained consciousness. When he saw her, there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. Junior Martial Brother Yi, the pills you gave me, Tiange smiled bitterly. They were specially prepared for the sake of this trial. Now, I can only let Senior Martial Brother take advantage of them. She didn't dare to say she had another bottle on her. Although Senior Martial Brother Murong didn't seem like that kind of person and was Murong Yan's elder brother, they didn't have much of a friendship. Murongzi didn't doubt her. His expression changed as he earnestly said, "Thank you, Junior Martial Brother Yi. If it weren't for the medicinal pills you gave me, my injuries definitely wouldn't have lasted until tomorrow." Tiange simply waved her hand. "If Senior Martial Brother Murong doesn't want to take advantage of me, you can just return the medicinal pills to me after we leave this place. Right now, I have to treat my injuries first. Otherwise, if we run into someone again..." At this point, she suddenly wrinkled her brows. Someone was coming. Chapter 66. Tiange shook her sleeves. Several things flew out and were buried in the soil. Soon after, she grabbed a few restorative spirit pills and stuffed them into her mouth. After doing these two things, the figures of a few people appeared in the poisonous fog. Tiange immediately tightened her grip on her greenwood sword. Murongzi, on the other hand, endured the pain and stood up. There were a total of 3 people, all of whom were 10th layer Qi refining cultivators. The one in the lead was a middle-aged cultivator, a young man about 20 years old, and an old man about 50 to 60 years old. The 3 of them didn't seem easy to deal with. Since the middle-aged cultivator was the leader, he must have the highest status or the most powerful. The young man was able to reach the 10th layer of the aura refining realm at such a young age, so he must also have some skills. As for the old man, there was no need to talk about him. He had a lot of experience, so he must be the most cunning. When he and Murongzi glanced at each other, both of them smiled bitterly. He had just experienced a bitter battle, and he had actually encountered such a combination. The 3 men stood not far away, cautiously sizing them up. Both Tiange and Murongzi secretly pretended to be indifferent and tightened their grip on their flying swords. After a while, the young man couldn't help but ask, "Senior brothers, what are we waiting for?" The old man frowned and slowly said, "Be careful." They all saw the corpse of the iron-teethed crocodile on the ground. Although it was already dead, there was still a huge pressure remaining. It was obvious that it wasn't a Tier 1 demonic beast, which caused them to hesitate. For two people to be able to kill a second-rank demonic beast, it was obvious that these two people definitely had extraordinary skills. However, they themselves were not to be trifled with, so they were unwilling to let it go just like that. It must be known that the corpse of a second-rank demonic beast could definitely be exchanged for a foundation-building pill. Caution, consideration, fanaticism, these expressions appeared on the faces of the three of them in turn. He was worried that his opponent would be too strong and lose him, but at the same time, he was unwilling to let go of such a great benefit. The corpse of a second-rank demonic beast could not only be made into a spirit tool, but it could also be made into a magic tool for Foundation establishment cultivators. This was another huge fortune. The young man couldn't restrain himself and shouted, "Senior brothers, what are you hesitating for? Are we going to let them off for nothing?" The old man said, "These two aren't easy to deal with. Don't be rash." Finally, the two of them looked at the middle-aged cultivator between them. For a time, the middle-aged cultivator was also hesitant. He had no confidence in killing them, and he was unwilling to let them go. However, the two of them were looking at them with indifferent expressions, as if they didn't care about their decision at all. In fact, Immortal and Murongzi weren't relaxed at all. Although Murongzi had taken a small reversion pill, healing his injuries wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Fighting while he was seriously injured repeatedly had already caused serious damage to his meridians. Right now, his expression remained unchanged purely because of his unswerving determination. Immortal was the same. She was fully aware that they had just gone through a bitter battle and both of them were exhausted, so how could she not be nervous? However, she was no longer a child who hadn't seen the world. She had traveled extensively with Second Uncle and experienced many fights of magical powers in the past few years, so she knew she couldn't show weakness at this time. The middle-aged cultivator struggled for a long time before reluctantly saying, "Let's go somewhere else to take a look." The three of them turned around to leave. Immortal and Murongzi secretly heaved sighs of relief. They really didn't have the confidence to fight them. Unexpectedly, the three of them suddenly stopped. The middle-aged cultivator sneered. "We were almost fooled by them. After killing a second-rank demonic beast, even if they weren't injured, how much spiritual aura would they have left?" Right after he said that, the three of them turned around and immediately split into three directions to flank them. Immortal immediately slapped a defensive talisman on her body and released her greenwood sword. Murongzi's reaction wasn't slow either. Although he didn't have any talismans, he still had his spirit tool. The flying sword mixed with iron essence was extremely fast and flew out in a flash. The two of them struck first and gained the upper hand, catching their opponents off guard. The young man looked at the two flying swords flying towards him and momentarily panicked. These two swords were very fast, so they obviously weren't ordinary weapons. He had no choice but to dodge in a hurry. Immortal stealthily shifted her position and threw out a large number of fire thorn seeds, temporarily trapping the young man. Just as she was about to tell Murongzi to deal with the old man together, she heard a muffled groan. She turned around and saw Murongzi clutching his chest while spitting out a mouthful of blood. The flying sword he was controlling was also swaying in the air. Immortal was shocked. Senior martial brother Murong. The three of them were overjoyed. The young man was trapped and couldn't escape for the time being. The middle-aged cultivator and the old man glanced at each other, then simultaneously attacked. The middle-aged cultivator took out the most common spirit tool in the cultivation world, the flying sword, while the old man threw out a mirror. Immortal hastily recalled her greenwood sword, but it only managed to block the mirror. The flying sword rapidly stabbed towards Murongzi, but Murongzi barely managed to dodge it. The flying sword brushed past his shoulder, causing blood to blossom. How could the middle-aged cultivator let go of this opportunity? He quickly flew towards Murongzi, caught the flying sword, and stabbed it towards him. Immortal wanted to help, but the old man's mirror was really powerful. After being blocked by her, it flew back to the old man's hand. He immediately flipped the mirror over and a golden light shone towards her. Although she had a defensive barrier on her body, she didn't dare to block it, so she could only take back her greenwood sword to block the golden light. Right at that moment, the middle-aged cultivator had already closed in on Murongzi. Seeing that Murongzi didn't have any strength to fight back, the middle-aged cultivator revealed an evil grin and stabbed the flying sword in his hand. Pooh! The flying sword pierced deep into Murongzi's body. Blood flowed down the blade of the sword, but at the same time, the middle-aged cultivator let out a loud "ah" and let go of the sword to cover his abdomen. A flying sword pierced through his abdomen on his back. It was Murongzi's incomparably sharp flying sword mixed with iron essence. Imotienga's expression changed greatly, but she heard the other party shout, "Senior Martial Brother Zhang." Murongzi and the middle-aged cultivator perished together, but the other party didn't look angry. Instead, they panicked. In just a short moment, one of them was trapped and the other was killed. The old man made a prompt decision. He put away the mirror in his hand, then immediately fled into the distance. Perhaps the reason he could survive until now was because he was timid. Imotienga didn't chase after him. Instead, she swung her flying sword, ending the middle-aged cultivator's life, then turned towards the remaining young man. Once the young man saw the old man fleeing, his expression immediately became very unsightly. He swung the large knife in his hand, chopping the fire brambles in half and attacking Imotienga. Imotienga had never met an opponent who used spirit tools to attack like a secular martial artist, so she couldn't react in time. Fortunately, she had defensive talismans on her, so she retreated while parrying with her greenwood sword. She wanted to counterattack, but she didn't have much spiritual aura left, so she could only retreat slowly. Seeing that she didn't dare to take his attack, the other party had a complacent expression on his face as he approached step by step. Imotienga suddenly smiled. A formation flag appeared in her hand and she waved it lightly. All of a sudden, with a "pa" sound, the formation flags and formation discs that were hidden suddenly stood up. The young man turned pale with fright, but he was already bewildered by the scene in front of him. Yellow sand filled the sky. It was like a desert in the far west. Apart from that, there was nothing else. This was a formation she hastily laid just now. Originally, she wasn't sure if she could use it. Fortunately, this young man was an impulsive person, so she lured him into the formation step by step. Now that he was in her formation, he was naturally at her mercy. She waved the formation flag again, and the scene changed again. Spells of the 5 elements flew towards the young man in an endless stream. The young man brandished his knife to block them, but he discovered that these spells disappeared upon contact. They were simply illusions. He was so angry that he cursed loudly. Imotienga once again swallowed a restorative panacea, then grabbed a talisman. She controlled her greenwood sword and attacked the young man in the formation together. The young man thought it was an illusion again, so he didn't block them. He was immediately hit solidly and couldn't be more dead. Imotienga heaved a sigh of relief and withdrew her greenwood sword. When she thought of Murongzi, she hastily ran back. Senior Martial Brother Murong. She once again helped Murongzi up from the ground. Imotienga discovered that his breath was already very weak. He was already seriously injured. The two of them encountered the iron-teethed crocodile, and after a thrilling battle, they finally killed it. Then they encountered these 3 enemies. His abdomen was pierced through. He basically relied on his last breath to kill that middle-aged cultivator, but in the end he couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed. Right now, his spiritual aura was exhausted, his meridians were damaged, and his dantian was also pierced through. He simply couldn't be saved. Murongzi slowly opened his eyes and said with difficulty, "Junior? Martial Brother Yi?" Imotienga nodded. "I'm here." Murongzi spat out a mouthful of blood. Imotienga hastily supported him. She pressed her palm against his and channeled spiritual aura into his body. This made Murongzi feel a bit better. He showed a faint smile and said in a weak voice, "I know. I can't hold on anymore. Please, do me a favor." Imotienga promptly nodded. "Senior Martial Brother Murong, please speak." Murongzi pulled out his Qianquan bag with difficulty and gasped for breath. In our clan, the one with the most hope, Xiaoyan. Please, the demonic beast and the flying sword. I killed to her. He closed his eyes and said, as for the rest, I'll give it to junior martial brother as a souvenir. As he spoke, blood kept flowing out of his mouth and he firmly held onto Imotienga's sleeves. Upon hearing his last words, Imotienga sighed inwardly. Rest assured, senior martial brother. I'll bring the things there. Murongzi smiled, but his eyes were filled with unwillingness and sorrow. He finally loosened his grip, his head tilted, and he breathed no more. Imotienga was stunned for a long time before she regained her composure. Although she didn't have any friendship with Murongzi, she still felt sad. This was the omnipresent death of cultivators. Not long ago, although senior martial brother Murong was seriously injured, he was still talking cheerfully and full of confidence. But in the blink of an eye, he became a corpse. She wiped her face, erased this sadness, then stood up to clean up the scene. In any case, she had to continue living, building her foundation, forming her gold core, forming her nascent soul. She had to live happily. First, she removed the Qianquan bags and weapons from the 3 corpses, then burned the corpses clean. She only put Murongzi's ashes in a jade box. Soon after, she cleaned the bloodstains on her body and sorted the things in the 3 Qianquan bags. She used up a lot of her own medicinal pills and talismans, but fortunately, the 2 Xianxia sect disciples still had some. All 3 of them had the corpses of demonic beasts on their bodies, but the other 2 only had 3 to 5, while Murongzi had more than 10. After pondering for a moment, she took out a Qianquan bag and put all the demonic beasts the 3 of them hunted into it. She then put all the spirit tools on Murongzi's body into the Qianquan bag. After all, she had gone through thick and thin with Murongzi and was acquainted with Murongyan. These spirit tools were useless to her, so she might as well return them to Murongyan. That is, if Murongyan was still alive. Soon after, she went to deal with the iron-teethed crocodile's corpse. This iron-teethed crocodile's carcass was a valuable material for refining tools. While she was cleaning up, she found the flying needles Murongzi left behind. These flying needles were sparkling and transparent, almost traceless. They were indeed good for sneak attacks. She then put all of them into her Qianquan bag. After she finished sorting everything and replenished her spiritual aura inside the formation, Imotienga decided to leave the poisonous spring. That old man from Xianxia sect had escaped, so who knew if there would be anyone else coming? It would be better for her to find another place to hide. Imotienga couldn't help but sigh when she turned around to look at the poisonous spring. Not long ago they were talking cheerfully and wittily, but now they were already a pile of ashes. Chapter 67. She entered the valley at 7 a.m. yesterday, so it was now 1:15 a.m. Imotienga calculated that she still needed 6 hours to leave the valley. A lot of things could happen in 6 hours, and a lot of people could die. She needed to be more cautious. The exit formation would be opened in the center, and the more central the area was, the more dangerous it would be. Imotienga thought for a long time before she decided to wander around the periphery. Once the formation opened, she would go to the center. Moreover, she had to use her divine sense at all times. Not only did she have to avoid people, but she also had to avoid demonic beasts. This was somewhat difficult, but it was still safer than staying in the poisonous spring. Who knew whether that old man from Xianxia sect would call his fellow disciples or not? After all, the corpse of a second-rank demonic beast was very attractive to aura-refining cultivators like them. In the east of this forest, there was a 300 feet tall waterfall. In the southwest, there was a high mountain. In the north, there was the cliff they came down from, and in the northwest, near the cliff, was the poisonous spring. The only way to leave this forest was to the northwest of the poisonous spring. However, the poisonous spring was an extremely dangerous existence. Not only were there demonic beasts that lived in groups, but there was also a poisonous fog that filled the air. There were also unknown dangers in the deep water, so no one would think of leaving from there. Therefore, nearly 1,000 aura-refining cultivators were in this forest. Even though this forest was very large and it wasn't easy to meet friends, it wasn't difficult to meet people. An hour after leaving the poisonous spring, Immortal had already met several groups of people. What Murongzi said was true. The three groups had already formed teams to guard against danger and to kill enemies. In order to avoid these people, she spent a lot of effort. Her breath-concealing technique was only passed down from Yi clan's records, so it couldn't be considered brilliant. However, because the spirit-concealing jade pendant not only concealed her physique but also had spiritual aura-gathering and purifying effects, the effects of her spells were somewhat enhanced. Because she knew her limits, she was even more cautious. Whenever she sensed someone from afar, she would immediately avoid them. Along the way, she could clearly see the fierceness of the battle. More than once, Immortal saw traces of fights of magical powers, charred trees, cracked ground, and congealed bloodstains. Every dark red puddle on the ground perhaps represented the end of a life. Sometimes, they would come across corpses that had not been disposed of. Some of them were dressed in purple, some in yellow, and some in green. The frozen expressions on their faces were all hatred and fear. Occasionally, she would see familiar faces. They were fellow disciples or sisters she had met in the sect. Fortunately, there weren't any fellow disciples that she could call friends with. Later, she gradually became numb to it. No matter what kind of marks she encountered, she could turn a blind eye to them. Nevertheless, despite being so careful, she was still discovered by the two Xianxia sect disciples. With the greenwood sword guarding her side and several talismans in her other hand, Immortal discreetly observed her surroundings. Among the two people besieging her, one was a robust man whose physique wasn't inferior to Daoist's, and the other was a beautiful young married woman. The young woman was in the 10th layer of the aura-refining realm, and the burly man was in the 9th layer of the aura-refining realm. Moreover, both of them seemed to be very experienced in fights of magical powers. One in front of the other in the back, they blocked her way. The surrounding trees were very dense, and the two directions that the two of them were blocking were the easiest points to break through. Immortal couldn't help but frown. It seemed escaping was impossible, so she could only kill them. However, these two people had silently surrounded her, so they might not be easy to deal with. She had to think of a way to deal with them. After sizing her up, the robust man uttered an "eh" and said, "Wife, this brat seems to be the one old man Chen mentioned." Old man Chen? Immortal pondered for a moment. Could he be the old man from Xianxia sect who ran away from the poisonous spring? However, she didn't expect the two people in front of her to be husband and wife. This young married woman's cultivation level was high and she was beautiful, but she actually chose such a crude man whose cultivation level wasn't obvious as her Dao companion? Immortal couldn't help but glance at the young married woman. The young married woman saw her face and said with a smile, "Husband, it's not like you don't know that old man Chen has always been timid. However, this little brother is quite handsome. What a pity." Upon hearing the young married woman praising another man's handsomeness, the robust man grunted with dissatisfaction. "Wife." The young married woman seemed to be very proud of her husband's jealousy. She covered her mouth and laughed for a while before saying, "Husband, what are you afraid of? No matter how handsome he is, won't he still die in our hands?" The robust man felt her words were reasonable. He chuckled and said, "Wife, you're right." He then turned towards Immortal and glared at her. "Brat, hand over your life." Right after he finished speaking, Immortal had already made her move. Her greenwood sword swiftly shot forward, but it was a feint. The raging flame talisman in her hand, which was hidden under the light of greenwood sword, flew out of her hand. The robust man was about to attack, but his initiative was seized. He immediately became furious and brandished the spirit tool in his hand, aiming to hit greenwood sword. His spirit tool was a huge iron wheel, which seemed to fit his body shape perfectly. He was quite confident in using his spirit tool to fight against Immortal. Unfortunately, Immortal's real killing move wasn't on her spirit tool. Greenwood sword retreated after being hit. After the iron wheel repelled greenwood sword, it still fiercely rushed towards Imotienga. At the same time, the young married woman behind her also opened an umbrella and threw it at her. Imotienga didn't panic. The raging flame talisman had already arrived. With a loud bang, the robust man let out a blood-curdling scream. Just as the iron wheel and the umbrella were about to reach her, Imotienga's figure suddenly disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, Imotienga appeared in front of the robust man. She thrust the greenwood sword in her hand, ruthlessly stabbing the robust man's chest. The robust man let out a shrill scream before he suddenly fell to the ground, no longer breathing. "Husband!" the young married woman screamed and rushed over. Imotienga used light body technique to jump and avoid the umbrella. She was able to successfully launch a sneak attack this time because her cultivation level was one layer higher than the robust man's, but the robust man still underestimated her. Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger was indeed the most useful trick in the cultivation world. This young married woman seemed to have deep feelings for her husband. When she realized her husband was no longer breathing, she angrily rushed towards Imotienga, wishing she could tear Imotienga's body into 10,000 pieces. Nevertheless, Imotienga didn't plan to fight her head-on. Her enemy had obviously lost her mind, so she didn't want to die together with her. Talismans and spirit tools were continuously thrown at her. Imotienga only dodged them by relying on light body technique. It wasn't until the other party was obviously so angry that she couldn't control herself that Imotienga threw the greenwood sword, talismans, and a handful of seeds at her. Seeing that Imotienga was using the same method to deal with her, the young married woman was furious. She patted a defensive talisman on her body and used the umbrella to block Imotienga's attack. Her other hand grasped a handful of talismans and was about to throw them at Imotienga. But she didn't have the chance. Before she could throw the talismans, she felt pain in her body. The hand holding the umbrella powerlessly slipped, and she fell to the ground. After confirming that the two people were dead, Imotienga collected their things and dealt with their corpses. She didn't stay for even a moment and ran away. This fight of magical power seemed to go very smoothly. In just a moment, she finished dealing with the two people, but in fact, her losses weren't small. In order to deal damage to that burly man, she had used up 5 or 6 flame talismans, which was equivalent to dozens of spirit stones. Moreover, she had also used a priceless invisibility talisman, which second uncle had spent a lot of money to buy. She killed the young married woman while she was panicking. It seemed like she used the same method she used to attack the burly man, but in fact, she mixed the talismans with the sparkling and translucent flying needles left by Murongzi. That was why she was able to silently break through the young married woman's umbrella and defensive barrier. Although she had a lot of experience in fights of magical power, this was the best time she had ever achieved her predetermined goal. She made a decision in a split second and immediately attacked without making any mistakes. In the blink of an eye, she gained the upper hand. Imotienga carefully reviewed this fight in her mind. She was in a calm and focused state, grasping all the details in her hands, making the most correct decision in a split second and hitting the target with one strike. She wanted to remember this feeling. This was the best state for fights of magical power. Someone else was in front of her. Imotienga turned around, but she didn't run far before she sensed several people's breaths not too far from her. She had no choice but to restrain her breath, find a tree, jump on it, and hide herself. The first group to pass by was a mixed group of people from Jindao School and Yunwu sect. Imotienga didn't plan to go out and greet them. With so many people together, it would be very easy for them to be discovered, and it would also be easy for them to fight. Although it would be safer with more people, more disputes meant more chances of death. These people passed by very quickly. Imotienga pondered for a moment and decided not to come down. Instead, she continued to sit on the top of the tree with her breath restrained and took out the Qingquan bags she obtained just now. The seeds in her hands were already used up, but there were still a lot of talismans and medicinal pills in the Qingquan bags of these Xianxia sect disciples. There were also several good spirit tools. However, for aura refining disciples, spirit tools that hadn't been refined by themselves weren't easy to use and could only be used as backups. In addition, The flying needles left by Murong Zi were quite useful. Controlling these flying needles required divine sense rather than spiritual aura, so aura refining cultivators couldn't use two spirit tools at the same time. If these flying needles were used well, very few aura refining disciples would be able to defend against them. After putting away the things that were useful for fighting, Mo Tiange jumped down from the tree and continued to move forward. She hadn't gone far when she was startled. There were a lot of corpses on the ground. There were disciples from all three cultivation groups. When she saw the faces of those dead Yunwu sect disciples, she realized that they were the ones who just passed by. As it turned out, they actually ran into another group of Xixia sect disciples and perished together. Mo Tiange shook her head and collected these people's jiankuan bags. She then set a fire and burned all the corpses. On her way here, at least 50 to 60 people had died, and there were still many places she hadn't been to. She was afraid that after 4 hours, less than half of the people would be able to leave this place alive. Thinking up to this point, she couldn't help but sneer. Xixia sect probably didn't expect this, right? Merging Yunwu sect and Jindao school resulted in the loss of countless high-level aura refining disciples. Among these people, they were the group of aura refining disciples with the highest hopes of building their foundation. As a result, the number of foundation-building cultivators in the next 100 years would be greatly reduced. They wouldn't be able to become the 8th cultivation group. On the contrary, their strength would be much weaker. Therefore, she wasn't the least bit afraid of being punished for killing people. Because at that time, they would discover that they couldn't afford to lose aura refining disciples. Chapter 68. In the dense forest, a figure was flying. She didn't stop until she couldn't sense the breaths of other cultivators behind her. What bad luck! Mo Tiange covered her chest with her hand. She felt the aura inside her body surging and felt very regretful. It was all because she was too careless. She thought she was very safe after laying a formation in her hiding place. As a result, the spiritual aura fluctuation of the formation was discovered by a group of people from Xixia sect, who planned to surround her. She was able to escape this time thanks to the several escape talismans she had and the formation that helped her resist for a while. Otherwise, if she had to face 5 or 6 people who were coming at her aggressively, she probably wouldn't even have ashes left. Her aura was a bit unstable for a while after she used the escape talisman forcefully in the encirclement. She swallowed an aura-nourishing pill and looked up at the starry sky. It seemed to be the hour of the Yi now. There were still more than 2 hours left before the exit formation would open. With the fierce melee, there were fewer and fewer people alive and more fighting scenes. Along the way, all she encountered were corpses, not people. Thinking of this, Mo Tiange shook her head and smiled bitterly. She didn't care about what happened to other people. It was good enough that she could save her own life. At this moment, she felt the aura inside her dantian was still unstable. She hesitated for a moment and finally found a tree with luxuriant branches and leaves. She jumped on it and restrained her aura completely. She didn't lay a formation, nor did she use her divine sense. She just quietly adjusted her aura. Although she wasn't seriously injured, if she didn't adjust her aura, it would be very disadvantageous for her if she encountered an enemy again. She didn't want to use the escape talisman again to escape, lest a minor injury turned into a serious one. As time passed, no one came to this place. It seemed that there were indeed not many cultivators alive in the forest. Mo Tiange sighed inwardly. After experiencing several life and death battles, she felt more and more indifferent. Even death couldn't easily move her. Perhaps, after seeing it many times, she felt it wasn't a big deal. There were so many deaths on the path of cultivation. If she didn't get used to it, how could she go further on the road to immortality? She was glad that she could adapt so quickly. Her aura gradually stabilized, and she breathed a sigh of relief. There seemed to be a demonic beast nearby. She could vaguely hear its roar, but obviously no one wanted to catch it now. The more people died, the more likely it was for the survivors to obtain the foundation-building pills. Moreover, Killing others and directly obtaining the spoils of war was much faster than slowly killing them one by one. Even she herself had obtained many demonic beasts that were killed by others. The two cultivators she killed in the poisonous spring, the husband and wife who besieged her, and the group of people who perished together with her, in addition to the 20 to 30 demonic monkey corpses on her body, she basically didn't need to take out all of the demonic beast corpses to obtain a foundation-building pill. Therefore, she didn't want to cause any trouble. Just because she was used to death did not mean that she would kill. As long as others did not offend her, she would not make a move. Thinking of this, she smiled bitterly. Sure enough, he had become a cold and heartless person. All of a sudden, the sound of light footsteps entered her ears. Tianxia opened her eyes. She didn't use her divine sense, so she didn't notice him until he came close. Then, through the branches and leaves, he vaguely saw several pairs of feet. It seemed like there were 3 people, 2 men and a woman. The woman's footsteps were staggering, which was very strange. She tilted her head but didn't move. She continued to hide. In a situation where she couldn't even protect herself, it was better not to meddle in other people's business. The voices of these people came from below. "Big brother, why did you walk for so long?" This voice was very young and sounded very impatient. Another voice, which was slightly lower, answered, "How would I know?" "Hey, stinky girl, you're not lying to us, are you?" The woman's coughs rang out. Tianxia couldn't help but frown. This voice. "Senior Martial Brothers, why are you so anxious? Can't you sense the demonic beast's spiritual aura? That demonic beast is guarding that vermilion heart fruit tree." It was Yan's voice. This answer seemed to have been muddled. The younger one said, "What you said seems to be reasonable." As the footsteps gradually faded away, Tianxia muttered to herself for a moment, then quietly slipped down from the tree and quietly followed them. The cultivation levels of these 2 male cultivators couldn't be considered high. One was in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm, while the other was in the 9th layer. They actually survived until now and were even together with Yan. Moreover, based on their conversation, it seemed they wanted Yan to take them to find some vermilion heart fruit. She had never heard of this kind of spiritual fruit. Could it be some kind of mystical fruit? Tianxia shook her head and denied this idea. If it really was some kind of mystical fruit, Yan should have gone to pick it a long time ago. Why would she wait until now? She must have been caught by these 2 men and used those words to deceive them. Tianxia quietly approached them and carefully observed the situation. Sure enough, Yan's hands were tied and her body was injured. The 2 male cultivators were Xianxia sect cultivators. One was in his 20s while the other was in his 20s. They soon found the demonic beast's location. Soon after, she saw the 2 men fly into a rage and pull out their spirit tools. "Stinky girl, you actually dared to deceive us brothers." However, Yan was also very quick-witted. She desperately dodged to the side and cleverly startled the demonic beast. She then hid behind the 2 men and the demonic beast pounced on them. This demonic beast was a first-rank giant ape. Although its cultivation level wasn't obvious, its skin was thick and its flesh was extremely strong. For a moment, the 2 men's hands and feet were tied down by it. Seeing this, Yan quietly retreated. Taking advantage of the fact that the 2 men weren't paying attention, she hastily ran backwards. "Big brother, this whore wants to run." The younger one fiercely stared at Yan's back. The older one used his spirit tool to block the giant ape's attack and shouted, "Chase after her. She actually deceived us. We can't let her run away." "Alright." The younger one withdrew his spirit tool and chased after the giant ape. After barely blocking the giant ape's attack once again, the man muttered, "This won't do. She's too strong. It seems I have to use a treasure." With that thought in mind, he took out a pigeon egg-sized purple ball from his robe and threw it at the giant ape. With a loud boom, the giant ape was instantly blasted into a bloody mess. The rocks and trees in the vicinity were all blown away, raising the area within a radius of 30 meters to the ground. The man felt a bit of heartache as he watched the bloody mess. There wasn't a single piece of flesh left on the ground. It was unclear whether he was feeling heartache for the corpse that couldn't be pieced back together or the treasure he used. After feeling heartache for a while, he clenched his teeth and turned around to chase after his younger brother. However, he only ran a few steps when he heard his younger brother's miserable scream. Startled, he hurriedly ran forward. Third brother! Third brother! Before long, he found his younger brother lying on the ground and there was no one around him. Emotienga pulled Murong Yen and ran madly. She only stopped when she could no longer sense that person's breath. Murong Yen looked at her gratefully. Junior Martial Brother Yi, thank you. Fortunately, I met you. Otherwise, Emotienga shook her head and said with a smile, Senior Martial Sister Murong, you don't have to be so polite. It was nothing. She paused for a moment then asked curiously, Senior Martial Sister, what happened? Emotienga's question made Murong Yen smile bitterly. She shook her head and said, it's all because I didn't like cultivating before. This time, I really suffered a lot. I ran into Xiaosek's disciples several times, but every time, I narrowly escaped. Later, I ran into them. They wanted to kill me, but I lied to them that there was a strange plant here. Sure enough, it was like that. Emotienga nodded. What was that thing in that person's hand? How could it be so powerful? About that, I'm also not very clear. Spirit tools don't seem like spirit tools, and magic weapons don't seem like magic weapons. It seems to be a kind of special object refined from the soul of demonic beasts and a lightning spell. Once it's thrown with spiritual aura, it will explode. Its power is extremely powerful. From what I've seen, no one can withstand it. This was Emotienga's first time seeing this thing. Its power was indeed enormous. Perhaps no aura-refining cultivator could withstand it, so she chose to run. After all, she didn't want to lose her life. When she saw Murong Yen, Emotienga couldn't help but think of Murong Zi. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still decided to think about it after they got out. Danger was everywhere now. If she suddenly found out that her elder brother had died, she was afraid her emotions would fluctuate and affect the fight of magical powers. Emotienga asked, Senior Martial Sister Murong, what do you plan to do next? Upon hearing Emotienga's question, Murong Yen showed a bitter smile. I won't hide it from Junior Martial Brother Yi. Before I came here, I was full of ambition and was determined to fight for a foundation-building pill. Only now do I realize that I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I don't have any regrets now. I just hope to get out of here safely. In the future, I'll cultivate diligently before thinking about other things. Emotienga nodded inwardly upon hearing what Murong Yen said. It seemed Murong Yen really understood. This was good. Murong Zi's painstaking efforts weren't wasted. Junior Martial Brother Yi. Murong Yen hesitated for a while, but in the end, she still shook her head. Forget it. We'll talk about it if I can get out of here alive. I'll take my leave first. Emotienga was stunned. Senior Martial Sister Murong, you're not coming with me? Murong Yen suddenly turned her head. Junior Martial Brother Yi, you don't mind coming with me? Emotienga was dumbfounded for a moment before she finally reacted. Could it be that Murong Yen thinks I won't be willing to go with her? Emotienga immediately smiled and said, What do you think, Senior Martial Sister? Upon seeing Emotienga's expression, Murong Yen smiled embarrassedly. I was thinking too much. The two of them smiled at each other. The estrangement caused by the changes in the school during this period of time instantly disappeared. Murong Yen's expression was no longer stiff. Instead, she looked a little more relaxed. Junior Martial Brother Yi, I really underestimated you in the past. I never expected that your spells would actually be this powerful. I was indeed too lazy before. Emotienga teased her. Senior Martial Sister, it's good that you know you're lazy. I know my innate talent isn't good, so I have no choice but to work hard. She looked at the starry sky again. It was already the hour of the morning. There's still 2 hours left. Senior Martial Sister, we can get closer to the center. A hesitant expression appeared on Murong Yan's face. Are we going now? There should be a lot of people going to the center. Shouldn't we avoid them? Emo Tienga said, rest assured. We're close to the opening of the exit. Everyone wants to leave, so they definitely don't want to cause trouble. It'll actually be a bit safer than before. What Emo Tienga said was reasonable, so Murong Yan finally decided to believe her. She said straightforwardly, then I'll let junior marshal brother Yi decide. I'll go with you. Emo Tienga nodded. Senior marshal sister, how are your injuries? Are you okay with hurrying along? Murong Yan said, they're fine. They're just minor injuries. Since Murong Yan was sure, Emo Tienga didn't hesitate. Then let's go. The two of them used the light body technique and hurried towards the center. The closer they got to the center, the more people there were. Murong Yan felt very uneasy. She asked in a low voice, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, are you really okay? Emo Tienga pulled her hand and gave her a smile. I'm fine. Trust me. Murong Yan's face suddenly turned red. In the end, she nodded. Emo Tienga, however, didn't notice. She was still holding Murong Yan's hand and rushing towards the exit. Chapter 69. There was a huge open space in the center of the forest. Many cultivators from the three groups had gathered around the open space. They were all staring at each other with vigilance. Emo Tienga arrived with Murong Yan. Everyone's gaze fell on them, but no one dared to make a move because they were afraid of breaking the balance. Although there were many Xianxia sect disciples present, everyone cherished their lives. The disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school also didn't dare to make a move when they were obviously at a disadvantage. Otherwise, it would be too much of a loss if they lost their lives before killing their enemies. Without caring about these people's gazes, Emo Tienga found a corner close to her fellow disciples and pulled Murong Yan over. Seeing that the two of them were motionless, these people moved their gazes away from them and stared at the newcomers. Emo Tienga cautiously scanned the surroundings. Sure enough, Xianxia sect's main branch suffered heavy losses. There were less than 100 people present. Including those who hadn't arrived yet, there were probably no more than 200. There were about 60 to 70 people from Yunwu sect and Jindao school. All of them were covered in blood and had fierce gazes. Among the people she knew, only Jiang Shanghong was present. Obviously, he had also experienced a bitter battle. Now, he found a place to meditate. As for the others, Qin Shi, Lui Dao, and Su Jingji, none of them were present. Emo Tienga frowned slightly. She was a bit worried. Based on the number of people present, perhaps more than half of the cultivators died this time. She really couldn't be sure that those three people were still alive. At that moment, Murong Yan gently pulled her sleeve and whispered, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Seeing her pale face, Emo Tienga showed a comforting smile. Don't worry. In this place, Murong Yan knew that her methods and insight were inferior to Emo Tienga's, so she obediently listened to her. Emo Tienga looked up at the sky. The sky was already turning white. It was almost dawn. Once dawn arrived, the exit formation would appear here and they would be able to leave. Emo Tienga picked up a clean patch of grass and pulled Murong Yan to sit down. She seemed to be meditating and adjusting her breath like everyone else, but in fact, she was secretly observing the surroundings. She believed that many people present were as vigilant as she was. At the last moment, no one wanted to throw their lives away. Another group of Xianxia sect cultivators arrived. Emo Tienga swept her gaze over them and frowned. She found that the old man who ran away from the poisonous spring was among them. However, she did not intend to take any action. Firstly, even though they had fought once, there was no enmity between them. Secondly, once she made a move, the balance would be broken. She still wanted to return alive. The old man also noticed her, and a look of surprise flashed across his face. Then, like her, he pretended not to see her. Presumably, many of the people present did the same. Revenge could be taken in the future, but it was not worth it to pay with their lives. More and more people came. When it was almost dawn, a few cultivators would come out of the forest from time to time and find their own camps. There were also enemies who appeared together, but they glared at each other angrily and did not make a move. Just when everyone was anticipating the opening of the formation, a loud shout suddenly rang out, "Damned girl, I finally found you. Return my brother's life." Soon after, a figure pounced towards Murong Yen. Tiange wrinkled her brows. She pulled Murong Yen up with one hand and used her greenwood sword with the other to block the opponent's attack. When he took a closer look, he discovered that it was the elder brother of the pair of brothers who had just captured Murong Yen. Oh no! Tiange turned around to look. Sure enough, the atmosphere in the field changed. Everyone's gazes fell on them. Many people had already secretly taken out their spirit tools. She was extremely furious. This blockhead. Just now, when she heard the conversation between the two brothers, she already thought they were stupid. It seemed there was something wrong with their brains. She immediately took out an earth-splitting talisman with her other hand and threw it at him. Although this blockhead was slow, his reaction wasn't slow. He somersaulted and dodged her attack. Their actions ignited the atmosphere in an instant. Several Yunwu sect disciples wanted to help, so Xianxia sect's side immediately took action. As a result, the two sides had already started fighting before they could arrive. Tiange had no time to deal with the chaos. She looked up and saw that the blockhead had taken out a pigeon egg-sized purple ball and was about to throw it at her. She was instantly shocked. Murong Yan's complexion was even paler. They had seen the power of this thing with their own eyes. Once it was thrown, they definitely wouldn't be able to resist it. Seeing that the other party was about to throw the purple ball, Tiange hurriedly took out a high-grade defensive talisman and slapped it on the talisman. A defensive barrier immediately appeared and covered the two of them. Boom! A deafening sound rang out, followed by the screams of other cultivators. Tiange moved her spiritual aura, preparing to resist it. But in the next moment, the incoming force was easily blocked by her. She opened her eyes and was dumbfounded. She gnashed his teeth and shouted, "Why are you in a daze? Come and help." He raised a sword, poured his spiritual aura on it, and stood in front of them. Tiange felt as if she had just woken up from a dream. She hastily moved her spiritual aura to share part of the impact. After a while, the spiritual aura pressure finally subsided. Seeing that they actually blocked it, the blockhead shouted angrily and wanted to rush towards them again. Since she almost lost her life, how could Tiange be polite to him? She immediately used an ice-condensing talisman. Murong Yen also didn't stay idle. She also rushed forward with her spirit tool. She released a raging flame art. Although the blockhead's abilities weren't low, he couldn't withstand the three people's joint attack. In order to dodge the ice-condensing talisman, he was hit by Xi's spell. His movements were a step too slow, so he was immediately hit by Murong Yan's spirit tool. He staggered and fell to the ground. Seeing that he was completely dead, the three of them heaved sighs of relief. The power of this purple ball was indeed extraordinary. Aside from them, the people around them were also caught in the crossfire. Some people were even badly mutilated by the explosion. Only a few people managed to block the impact. The dead and injured were all disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school. Although the instigator was already dead, each and every one of them was furious. They raised their spirit tools and rushed towards the Xianxia sect disciples. Xianxia sect disciples also had the advantage in numbers, so how could they be willing to show weakness? They also rushed forward. Spells and spirit tools were flying everywhere in the sky. Junior Martial Brother Yi. She waved at them after dealing with a sneak attack. Tiange was on guard as she pulled Murong Yen closer to him. Senior Martial Brother Qin, thank you. Don't thank me so quickly. He took out a bunch of talismans as if they were free and gave them to the two of them. Hold on for a while. The exit will open in about a quarter of an hour. Tiange also knew that this wasn't the time to be polite. She took the talismans he handed her, then turned around and threw a raging flame talisman at the Xianxia sect disciples who were rushing towards them. This battle royale had the largest number of participants since the start of the day and night. It was also the most intense one. Spells, talismans, and spirit tools were flying everywhere. It was hard to tell whether they were on their own side or the enemy's side. They couldn't even dodge and could only use spells and talismans to resist. In the end, the three of them had no choice but to stick a defensive talisman on each of them to resist all kinds of attacks. Eventually, a white light shone in the center of the open space. This white light became brighter and brighter until it slowly formed the shape of a formation. It was overflowing with light and vibrant colors, and it was full of spiritual aura. Everyone's gazes were attracted by the formation. Even the fighting stopped. In a flash, everyone rushed towards the formation like a swarm of bees. Xianxia intentionally retreated a bit, but the people behind her also rushed forward. A group of people rushed towards the formation in a chaotic manner. Soon, they were squeezed into the formation. The scene in front of them changed. Xianxia raised her head. With a glance, she saw the three core formation cultivators with ashen complexions. Disciples came out of the cliff one after another. Almost every one of them was covered in blood and looked miserable. Some of them were even seriously injured. Murong Yen, who was next to her, leaned towards her and whispered, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, will we?" Xianxia shook her head and whispered back, "Don't worry." Although these core formation cultivators had ashen complexions, they didn't have any killing intent, so they probably wouldn't attack them. Besides, after the last battle royale, perhaps only 1/3 of the original disciples would come out alive. If they still had to be punished, they might as well recruit new disciples. Once they left the murderous environment and didn't need to be vigilant, Xianxia felt exhausted all over. Her body tilted and she almost fell down. But when she turned her head, she saw Murong Yen staring at the formation with rapt attention. Xianxia's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly remembered she hadn't told him about Murong Zi. "Senior Marshal Sister Murong." Murong Yen answered softly but didn't look at her. She was still staring at the formation. Xianxia took a deep breath. She suddenly hated herself for telling such cruel news. "In fact, I met Senior Marshal Brother Murong." Upon hearing this, Murong Yen suddenly turned her head. Xianxia clenched her teeth and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Murong has passed away." Murong Yen was dumbfounded. She seemed to be in disbelief, but soon, her face gradually turned pale. She suddenly grabbed Xianxia's hand and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, can you say that again?" Xianxia sighed and repeated, "I met Senior Marshal Brother Murong. He's already passed away." Murong Yan's face turned pale, but she didn't let go of her hand. Instead, she stared at Xianxia and asked, "Junior Marshal Brother, do you have any proof?" This time, Xianxia didn't say anything. She just handed Murong Zi's Qianquan bag to her. Murong Yen took it with trembling hands and opened it eagerly. When she saw those familiar spirit tools, she finally looked sad and let go of her hands to cover her face. Although she wasn't responsible for Murong Zi's death, he died while they were fighting against the enemy. Xianxia felt very uncomfortable seeing Murong Yen so sad. She patted her shoulder and shook his head. He seemed to be comforting her that this wasn't her responsibility. She forced a smile, but she didn't feel any better. "Senior Marshal Sister, don't be sad. Senior Marshal Brother always wanted you to build your foundation." At this point, she couldn't continue speaking. How could a few dry words of comfort compare to the sadness of losing a loved one? After a long time, Murong Yen finally put down her hands. There were no tears on her face. Her face was pale and her expression was gloomy. She used to be a charming and lovely girl, but after a series of blows recently, she was no longer as bright and beautiful as before. "I'm sorry, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. It's not that I don't believe you, but I understand." Xianxia took out a jade box and handed it to her. "This is Senior Marshal Brother Murong's ashes. Senior Marshal Sister, don't be too sad. The dead are gone, so you should live better." Murong Yen accepted the jade box and the Qianquan bag. A sad smile appeared on her face as she said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, Please tell me how my big brother died. Mo Tiange said, Senior Marshal Brother Murong and I happened to run into each other. He was attacked by someone and was seriously injured. While he was still recuperating, we ran into a second-rank iron-teeth crocodile, then we ran into 3 other people. In the end, Senior Marshal Brother Murong couldn't hold on any longer and died together with one of them. Mo Tiange simply explained, but she was still worried and emphasized, Senior Marshal Sister, don't think about revenge. This hatred can't be settled. How could Murong Yen not understand this? It was just that she always felt unwilling. After a long time, she reached out to wipe the remaining tears on her face and said with a determined expression, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, don't worry. I'm no longer the insensible me from before. I know what I should do. Soon after, she laughed self-mockingly and said, although we weren't biological siblings, Big Brother always doted on me. No matter what I wanted, he always thought of a way to get it for me. Now, he thought of a way to get me foundation-building pills, but I never expected the price would be his life. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.